In a high-rise apartment, where the city spills out below like a galaxy of fallen stars, a figure sits in the quiet. The room is a study in modern perfection. Clean lines, muted colors, every object in its designated place. By all external measures, this is the picture of success, the goal that was promised. Yet in the silence between the distant sirens, there is a hollow echo. A phone screen glows, a river of curated joy, of promotions and exotic travels and perfect families. But the connection feels thin, a ghostly touch that only highlights the profound sense of disconnection within. The question, unspoken but deafening, hangs in the air. Is this all there is? This feeling, this quiet ache of meaninglessness in a life full of things, is not a personal failure. It is the subtle sickness of our age. We are the children of a promise, the promise that if we chase hard enough, acquire enough, and achieve enough, we will find a lasting state of contentment. We are told to build a perfect life, but we are never taught what to do when we stand inside that life and feel nothing. This is the great paradox of our time, to be drowning in an ocean of information, yet thirsting for a drop of wisdom. To be connected to billions of people across the globe, yet to feel a loneliness so deep it has no name. For many, anxiety is no longer a fleeting guest. It has become the constant, humming background noise to our existence. The search for a solution, for a missing piece, often sends us outward, chasing the next promotion, the next relationship, the next experience, believing it will finally fill the void. But perhaps the answer does not lie in adding one more thing to our lives. Perhaps it lies in turning our gaze, for the very first time, inward. Thousands of years ago, a young prince, who had every pleasure and luxury the world could offer, felt this same profound dissatisfaction. His journey was not a quest to gain more, but a radical journey to understand the very nature of his own mind. His story offers not a religion to be believed, but a science of the inner world to be explored. This is an invitation to step off the frantic treadmill of seeking and to begin a different kind of journey, a journey to discover a set of practical, time-tested tools for navigating the chaos of the human heart, and to find a peace that does not depend on the ever-shifting circumstances of the world outside. It is a path of wisdom, a path to understanding the source of our own suffering and the means to its end. The first step on any authentic journey of discovery is not to leap towards an answer, but to have the courage to look squarely at the question. It is to diagnose the condition clearly and without flinching. In the language of this ancient path, the fundamental condition of our existence is summed up in a single, profoundly important word, dukkha. Now, the common translation of dukkha is suffering, but this word in English is heavy, laden with images of tragedy and immense pain, and while it certainly includes those things, it is also far more subtle, more pervasive, and more intimately familiar to us all. A better, more encompassing understanding of dukkha might be a pervasive sense of unsatisfactoriness. It is the inherent friction we feel in our lives. Imagine a beautifully crafted wooden wheel, perfect in almost every way, but its axle hole was drilled just a fraction of an inch off-center. On a smooth road, the journey would not be a disaster, but it would be accompanied by a constant, subtle, jarring vibration, a persistent wobble that prevents the ride from ever being truly smooth, truly restful. That subtle, ever-present wobble is dukkha. The Buddha's first great proclamation, the first noble truth, was simply this: there is dukkha. This was not a pessimistic statement designed to bring us down. It was not a judgment or a curse. It was the calm, compassionate, and unflinching diagnosis of a master physician. A doctor who truly wishes to heal a patient does not begin with false reassurances or empty platitudes. The doctor begins by naming the illness. This is what you have. Only from that place of clear recognition can a path to healing be charted. In the same way, acknowledging dukkha is not about embracing a negative worldview. It is the most optimistic act one can perform because it presupposes that if we can understand the sickness, we can also find the cure. It is an invitation to stop running, to stop distracting ourselves from the fundamental unease we all feel, and instead to turn around and get to know it with wisdom and with compassion. To truly understand this condition, we must see that it manifests in our lives in three distinct ways. The first is the most obvious, the one we all recognize as suffering. It is called dukkha, or the suffering of pain. This is the raw, undeniable pain of life. It is the searing pain of a migraine, the chronic ache in your back, the sharp grief of losing someone you love. It is the sting of betrayal, the anxiety of a financial crisis, the despair of depression. It is the pain of birth, of sickness, of old age, and of death. This form of dukkha needs little explanation, for it is a universal experience that touches every life without exception. It is the loud, unavoidable suffering that makes us cry out, and it is this raw pain that often sends us searching for answers in the first place. The second form of dukkha is far more subtle and perhaps even more pervasive in our modern world. It is called viparinama dukkha, the suffering of change. This is the unsatisfactoriness that arises from the fact that all things, especially pleasant things, are impermanent. Think of a moment of pure joy, a perfect sunset, the laughter of a child, the thrilling success of a long-sought goal, the intoxicating feeling of falling in love. These moments are beautiful, and they are real, but they are also fleeting, and deep down we know it. The suffering of change is that quiet, nagging anxiety that whispers in the background of our happiest moments, "This won't last." It is the reason we frantically try to capture a perfect moment with a camera, a desperate attempt to freeze a river that is, by its very nature, always flowing. Our happiness is so often built on things that are unstable. We find a partner we love, and immediately, a subtle fear of losing them appears. We get the promotion we craved, and now we worry about keeping the job or getting the next one. The pleasure itself contains the seed of its own demise. The very thing that brings us joy becomes a source of anxiety because we are attached to it, we cling to it, and we live in dread of the moment it will inevitably change or disappear. This explains so much of the emptiness felt amidst success. The goal was reached, the pleasure was experienced, but it did not last, and we are left feeling cheated, wondering why the happiness we were promised is as slippery as water held in our hands. The third and most profound form of dukkha is sankara dukkha, the suffering of conditioned existence. This is the background hum of unsatisfactoriness that is woven into the very fabric of being a separate self. It is a fundamental existential friction. It's that low-grade restlessness you feel on a perfectly ordinary Sunday afternoon when there's nothing wrong, but also nothing feels quite right. It's the feeling of being vaguely incomplete, the subtle but persistent sense that something is missing. This dukkha arises because our entire being, what we call ourself, is a conditioned phenomenon. It is a temporary assembly of constantly changing physical and mental parts, a process, not a static entity. Yet we cling to this process as if it were a solid, permanent thing. We spend our lives protecting this self, promoting it, defending its opinions, worrying about its future, and grieving its past. This constant effort of propping up and defending a phantom self is exhausting. It is a deep, foundational stress that underpins all our other anxieties. It is the wobble of the off-center wheel. It is the ultimate source of the feeling that life is somehow out of tune, that no matter how much we achieve or acquire, there is a fundamental dis-ease that we cannot seem to shake. To illustrate how we compound this inherent suffering, there is a powerful ancient teaching, the parable of the second arrow. The Buddha said that in life, we cannot always avoid the first arrow. The first arrow is the painful event itself. It is the sharp criticism from your boss, the unexpected bill in the mail, the traffic jam that makes you late. It is the diagnosis, the breakup, the loss. These things happen. They are painful, and they are, to a large extent, outside of our control. To be struck by this first arrow is a part of living a human life. But we, in our lack of wisdom, almost always shoot ourselves with a second arrow. The second arrow is our reaction to the first. It is our mental proliferation, our story about what happened. The first arrow strikes, and it hurts. But then we launch the second arrow of, why does this always happen to me? I'm such a failure. My life is ruined. That person intentionally tried to hurt me. This is unfair. We ruminate. We catastrophize. We wallow in self-pity or boil in rage. This second arrow is not fired by the world. It is fired by our own mind. Its poison is crafted from our judgments, our fears, and our attachments. The pain of the first arrow might last a moment, a day, or a week. But the suffering created by the second arrow can last for months, years, even a lifetime. Most of our chronic mental and emotional suffering is not the pain of the first arrow, but the self-inflicted wound of the second, and the third, and the fourth. Our modern world is a factory for second arrows. We are conditioned to react, to judge, to have a strong opinion about everything. We are taught to run from any discomfort. If we feel a pang of loneliness, we grab our phone. If we feel a moment of boredom, we turn on the television. If we feel the sting of failure, we distract ourselves with work or shopping. We spend our lives in a desperate, frantic flight from the first arrow, and in doing so, we shower ourselves with 1,000 more. So what is the alternative? The path begins not with fighting, but with acknowledging. It begins with the courage to simply be with the first arrow, without immediately launching the second. It is to see dukkha in all its forms, not as an enemy, but as a teacher. It is to feel the disappointment without adding the story of, I'm not good enough. It is to feel the anxiety of change without clinging desperately to what is passing. It is to feel the background hum of restlessness without needing to immediately fill it with noise. This acceptance is not passive resignation. It is a radical act of clarity and self-compassion. It is the moment a physician stops guessing and finally looks at the patient's chart with clear eyes. We have now named the condition. We have looked at the universal sickness of dukkha without blinking. We have seen its obvious forms and its subtle manifestations. And from this place of clear seeing, the next, most vital question naturally arises. If this is the sickness, what is its cause? Where does the poison for the second arrow truly come from? Having looked unflinchingly at the diagnosis of our shared condition, the pervasive unsatisfactoriness called dukkha, we must now act as skilled investigators of our own experience. We must ask the most critical question: where does this dis-ease come from? A fever does not arise from nowhere. A feeling of deep unrest does not simply appear. The second noble truth offers a precise and profound answer. It states that the origin of dukkha is tanha. This ancient Pali word is often translated as desire, but its meaning is closer to thirst or craving. This is a crucial distinction. Desire can be wholesome, like the desire to help someone or the desire to learn. Tanha, however, is a specific kind of thirst, one that is obsessive, compulsive, and deeply entangled with our sense of self. It is the primal, urgent impulse that grips the mind and whispers, I need this to be happy, or I need this to go away for me to be at peace. It is the engine that drives the endless cycle of seeking and dissatisfaction. It is the very fuel that ignites the second arrow. This thirst is not a simple, monolithic force. It is a complex drive that manifests in three distinct, yet interconnected streams that flow through the landscape of our mind. The first and most recognizable of these is kama tanha, the thirst for sense pleasures. This is the craving for things that delight our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body. Our entire modern consumer culture is a grand temple built in honor of this thirst. It is the irresistible pull towards the next delicious meal, the next captivating movie, the next hit song, the next stylish outfit, the next sexual encounter. It is the engine behind the endless scroll, each new image, video, or piece of gossip, a small taste, a momentary satisfaction that immediately gives way to the craving for the next one. This thirst is what makes us check our phones hundreds of times a day, seeking the pleasant neurological fizz of a new notification, a like, or a message. The problem, from a Buddhist perspective, is not that pleasure is bad. Pleasure is a natural part of life. The problem is the thirsting for it, the clinging to it, the belief that these fleeting sensory experiences can provide a deep and lasting happiness. They cannot. They are like flashes of lightning in a dark sky, brilliant for a moment, but leaving the darkness even more apparent when they are gone. This dependence on external stimuli for our well-being makes us fragile, constantly at the mercy of a world that will never consistently provide the pleasant experiences we crave. The second stream of thirst is deeper, more powerful, and speaks to our most fundamental existential anxieties. It is bhavatana, the thirst to be, or the craving for existence. This is the profound, relentless drive to become someone, to solidify our identity, to carve out a permanent and significant place in the world. It is the force behind unbridled ambition, the desperate need for fame, status, and recognition. It is the voice that insists, if I can just become a vice president, or a published author, or a respected expert, then I will have made it. Then I will be real. Then I will be safe. This craving fuels the culture of workaholism, the obsession with personal branding, and the meticulous construction of an idealized self on social media. We are not just sharing our lives, we are performing an identity that we hope will be validated by the world, proving to ourselves and others that we exist in a meaningful way. This thirst to become is a direct response to the deep, often unconscious fear of our own impermanence and groundlessness. We feel the shifting sands of our own being beneath our feet, and so we try to build a magnificent, immovable statue of me on top of them. It is a quest for permanence in an impermanent world, a thirst for a solid self where one cannot be found. This craving, this constant effort to become, is a primary source of stress, anxiety, and the inevitable disappointment that comes when our carefully constructed identities are challenged or ignored by the world. The third stream of thirst is the shadow of the second. It is vibhava tanha, the thirst for non-existence or the craving for annihilation. If kamatana is the pull towards pleasure, vibhavatana is the violent push away from pain. It is the intense craving to get rid of an unpleasant experience. When you have a terrible flu, this thirst manifests as the desperate wish, I just want this to be over. When you feel the sting of shame or embarrassment, it is the craving to disappear, to become invisible. This thirst is the primary driver of all forms of escapism. It is what leads us to numb our pain with alcohol or drugs, to distract ourselves with mindless entertainment or compulsive busyness, to procrastinate on difficult tasks. We are trying to annihilate the unpleasant feeling, to push it out of our awareness. In its most extreme and tragic form, this thirst for non-existence can manifest as thoughts of self-harm or suicide, the ultimate desire to annihilate the perceived source of the pain, the self. Vibhavatanha and bhavatanha are two sides of the same coin. Both are rooted in a fundamental misunderstanding of our own nature. We crave to solidify a self, and when that self experiences unbearable pain, we crave to destroy it. Both are violent reactions against the natural flow of experience. The true tragedy of Tana is that it is a self-perpetuating cycle. It promises happiness, but only delivers a deeper thirst. The Buddha used a powerful metaphor. Trying to satisfy tanha is like drinking salt water to quench a thirst. For a fleeting moment, the cool liquid might feel like relief, but almost immediately, the salt makes the body even more dehydrated, and the thirst returns with a vengeance, more desperate and more painful than before. You eat the decadent dessert you were craving. The pleasure lasts for a few minutes, but then it's gone, and the memory of it may soon give rise to a craving for another. You receive the praise you were seeking at work. The feeling of pride is wonderful, but soon you need another, bigger accomplishment to feel that same validation. You successfully distract yourself from your anxiety for an evening, but the next morning, it returns, often with interest, because its underlying cause was never addressed. This is the feedback loop from hell, the hamster wheel of wanting, getting, and wanting again. This is the engine of dukkha. In Buddhist cosmology, there is a realm of beings called the pretas, or the hungry ghosts. These beings are not meant to be taken as literal monsters, but as perfect psychological metaphors for a mind consumed by tanha. A hungry ghost is depicted with a gigantic, bloated stomach, representing its bottomless, insatiable hunger. Yet, It has a throat as thin as a needle's eye, so that no matter how desperately it tries to consume, it can never, ever get enough to feel full. It is doomed to wander in a state of perpetual, agonizing craving. It is surrounded by things that look like food and water, but when it reaches for them, they turn to fire or dust. This is a chillingly accurate portrait of the human mind in the grip of craving. When we are caught in Tana, we are all hungry ghosts, chasing after things that we believe will finally satisfy us, only to find they bring no lasting nourishment. We are tormented by a hunger that cannot be filled from the outside. By identifying tanha, this threefold thirst, as the root cause of our unsatisfactoriness, we have taken a monumental step. We have moved from being a confused victim of our own suffering to being a clear-eyed diagnostician. We can see the mechanism at work in our own lives. We can see the thirst for pleasure, the thirst to become, and the thirst to get rid of pain, all operating within us, pulling and pushing us, fueling our second arrows. This diagnosis is not a cause for despair. It is the dawn of hope. For if we know the precise cause of an illness, we can begin to formulate a cure. If we know what feeds the fire, we know that if we stop adding fuel, the fire must eventually go out. The knowledge that dukkha has a specific, identifiable cause leads us directly to the most liberating question of all. Is it possible for this thirst to cease? Is a cure for this fever actually possible? We have walked together into the heart of the human condition, looking directly at the pervasive dis-ease of dukkha, that subtle and constant friction in our lives. We have peered deeper still, identifying its source as tana, the relentless, insatiable thirst for things to be different than they are. Standing here, with this diagnosis in hand, it is easy to feel a sense of despair. If our suffering is caused by a craving that seems as fundamental as breathing, are we not then sentenced to a lifetime of dissatisfaction, forever chained to this cycle of wanting and suffering? Is this the final, grim conclusion of our inquiry? It is at this very precipice, this moment of potential despair, that the path offers its most radical, its most luminous, and its most hopeful message. This is the third noble truth, the truth of Nirodha. It is the simple, earth-shattering proclamation that there can be an end to suffering. Nirodha is a Pali word meaning cessation, ending, release, or confinement. It is the physician, having diagnosed the illness and identified the bacteria, now looking the patient in the eye and saying, with complete confidence, there is a cure. This is not a statement of blind faith. It is a principle of impeccable logic. If a condition has a specific cause, then by the complete removal of that cause, the condition must cease. If a fire is burning because fuel is being added to it, then when the feeding of the fuel stops, the fire must inevitably go out. If our dukkha, our dis-ease, is caused by tanha, our clinging and craving, then with the complete cessation of that craving, the dis-ease must also cease. This is the promise that transforms this entire path from a philosophical observation into a practical and profoundly optimistic project of liberation. It asserts that peace is not a myth and freedom is not a dream. They are our birthright, a potential that lies dormant within every one of us. It is vital, however, to be very clear about what this cessation, this nirvana truly is and what it is not. In the West, the word nirvana has been colored with fanciful ideas of a blissful, heaven-like paradise, a place of eternal sensual delight. This is a profound misunderstanding. Nirvana is not a place you go to. It is a state you realize, right here in this very life. The word itself offers the clearest clue. The literal meaning of the Sanskrit word nirvana, or nibbana in Pali, is to extinguish or to blow out, like snuffing out a candle flame. But what is it that is being extinguished? It is not the self, it is not our personality, or our life force. What is extinguished are the three fires that cause all our suffering: the fire of greed, the fire of hatred, and the fire of delusion. It is these fires, fueled by our craving, that burn us, that create the fever of dukkha. Nirvana is the state of perfect psychological health that remains when these fires have been completely put out. It is the coolness that prevails when the fever has broken. So what does this state feel like? Trying to describe it with positive words is like trying to describe the taste of silence to someone who has only ever known noise. It is often described by what is absent. It is the absence of stress, the absence of fear, the absence of craving, the absence of mental turmoil. But it is not a blank nothingness. It is a state of supreme clarity, unshakable peace, and profound freedom. Imagine spending your entire life in a noisy, chaotic, and stressful prison cell. Your mind constantly agitated, your body always tense. You believe this cell is the whole of reality. Nirvana is the realization that the cell door has been unlocked the entire time. It is the freedom of walking out of that cell into the vast, open, quiet expanse of the world. The world itself hasn't necessarily changed, but your relationship to it is completely, utterly transformed. This is the key. The cessation of suffering does not mean that life will suddenly become free of difficulty. First arrows will still fly. The body will still experience sickness and pain. Loved ones will still pass away. The world will still present its challenges and disappointments. The revolutionary change is that you are no longer compulsively shooting yourself with the second arrow. The painful event occurs, but the mind no longer reacts with its habitual storm of blame, rage, self-pity, or catastrophizing. The event is met with a spacious, compassionate, and wise awareness. The pain of the first arrow may be felt, but it passes through you without leaving the deep, septic wound of the second. Imagine standing on the shore of an ocean. Before, you were like a small, rudderless boat, tossed about violently by every single wave. After, you are like a deeply rooted lighthouse, standing firm and unshaken. The waves of life still crash against your foundation, but you are not moved. Your inner light is steady, providing clarity for yourself and others. This is the peace that surpasses understanding, because it is not contingent on getting what you want or making the world conform to your wishes. How is this state achieved? The third noble truth is explicit. This cessation is brought about by the complete fading away and cessation of that same tanha, its abandoning and relinquishing, the release from it, the liberation from it. The cure is the uprooting of craving. This is not a passive act. Letting go is not a weak collapse into resignation. It is a highly skillful and active process. It is the result of seeing craving clearly over and over again, understanding its nature as the very source of our suffering. When you truly, deeply see that the beautiful, enticing drink you are about to take is actually salt water that will only make you thirstier, you naturally put it down. You don't have to force yourself. The wisdom of seeing its true nature does the work. The spiritual practice is the training of the mind to see this reality, to stop automatically feeding the habits of clinging and aversion that have held us captive for so long. Let us return to the image of the fire. Our life of dukkha is like being trapped by a raging bonfire. The heat is scorching, the smoke is choking. Unaware, we have spent our entire lives compulsively grabbing logs of tanalogs, of wanting this, rejecting that, fearing this, clinging to that, and throwing them onto the flames, wondering why the fire never dies down. The practice begins with the radical act of becoming aware that we are the ones feeding the fire. We look at the log in our hand, the log of our current obsessive thought or compulsive desire, and we see it for what it is, more fuel. The third noble truth is the promise that if we simply stop, if we put the log down, the fire will begin to subside. At first, the blaze continues to burn from the fuel already present. But as we continue, moment by moment, to refrain from adding more logs, the roaring inferno shrinks to a cheerful blaze, then to a gentle crackle, then to a pile of softly glowing embers. And finally, even the embers cool, leaving behind not a cold emptiness, but a profound, peaceful stillness. The heat is gone, the smoke is gone. There is only a vast, cool, and liberating peace. This is the promise at the heart of the path. We are not fundamentally flawed. Our suffering is not a permanent stain on our being. We are not doomed to be hungry ghosts, forever chasing a satisfaction that never arrives. The fever can break, the thirst can be quenched, the fires can be extinguished. An end to suffering is possible. This knowledge, this confident assurance of a cure, changes everything. It infuses the journey with a luminous hope and a clear purpose. And it leads us, with both urgency and excitement, to the final, all-important question. If there is a cure, what precisely is the medicine? What is the specific path we must walk to extinguish these flames and realize this freedom for ourselves? We have now arrived at the very heart of our journey. We have stood before the mirror and acknowledged the universal symptom of dukkha, the pervasive friction of existence. We have investigated its origins and found them in the feverish thirst of tanha. And we have been offered the luminous, life-altering hope of nirodha, the truth that a cure is possible, that the fever can break. A deep and practical question now hangs in the air, filled with a newfound urgency and potential. If there is a cure, what is the medicine? What is the precise, practical, and effective treatment that can lead us from the shore of suffering to the shore of freedom? The answer to this is the Fourth Noble Truth. It is the Buddha's great prescription, a comprehensive guide for living, a detailed map for the territory of the human mind. It is called the Noble Eightfold Path. This is not a set of rigid commandments handed down from on high. It is a path to be walked, an art of living to be cultivated. The very word path is empowering. It implies a process, a gradual unfolding. It suggests that we are not trying to achieve an impossible ideal overnight, but rather we are taking one step and then another and then another. It is a path of transformation, one that works not through blind faith, but through direct personal experience and diligent, intelligent effort. It is the ultimate expression of self-reliance, placing the key to our own liberation firmly into our own hands. Before we explore its 8 components, we must first understand the spirit in which the path is to be walked. This spirit is encapsulated in the principle of the middle way. The Buddha, before his enlightenment, had experienced both extremes of life. As a prince, he had lived in the extreme of sensual indulgence, surrounded by every pleasure imaginable, only to find it empty and unsatisfying. Later, as an ascetic, he practiced the other extreme of severe self-mortification, starving his body and punishing himself relentlessly, only to find that this too did not lead to wisdom, but merely to a weakened body and a despairing mind. The story is told of a monk named Sona, who was practicing with such ferocious, painful intensity that he became discouraged and thought of giving up. The Buddha, knowing Sona had been a gifted musician, went to him and asked, "Sona, tell me, when the strings of your lute were too tight, could you produce beautiful music?" Sona replied, "No, Lord." The Buddha asked again, "And when the strings were too loose, could you produce beautiful music?" "No, Lord," Sona said again. "And when," the Buddha inquired, "were you able to create beautiful and harmonious sounds?" Sona answered, "When the strings were not too tight and not too loose, Lord, when they were tuned to an even pitch." The Buddha then said to him, "In the same way, Sona, energy that is too strenuous leads to restlessness, and energy that is too slack leads to laziness. Therefore, cultivate a balance of energy and find the beauty of the middle way. The Noble Eightfold Path is this perfectly tuned instrument. It avoids the dead-end extremes of hedonism and asceticism, offering instead a balanced, sustainable, and profoundly effective way to train the mind and transform our lives. The path's 8 factors are not a random collection of rules, but a beautifully integrated system, a holistic curriculum for human development. They are traditionally grouped into 3 essential trainings. The first is the training in ethical conduct, or sila. This is the foundation of the path. It is concerned with how we conduct ourselves in the world, how we use our speech and our physical actions. By committing to non-harming, we create a life free from remorse, guilt, and the agitation that comes from causing harm to ourselves or others. A life of ethical integrity creates an external environment of peace, which is the necessary ground for deeper inner work. This training includes 3 path factors: right speech, right action, and right livelihood. With the foundation of ethical conduct established, we can begin the second training in mental discipline, or samadhi. Now that our outer world is more settled, we can turn inward to train the mind itself. This is the heart of meditation. It is the practice of developing a calm, focused, and powerful awareness. It's about learning to tame the so-called monkey mind, which constantly swings from thought to thought, lost in distraction and restlessness. Through this training, the mind becomes a refined and powerful instrument, capable of deep concentration and stability. This training is composed of 3 path factors: right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Finally, when the mind has been calmed and sharpened through the training in mental discipline, we are ready for the 3rd training in wisdom, or pana. A mind that is stable and clear, like a still lake, can now reflect reality as it truly is, free from the distortions of our fears and desires. This is where true transformation occurs. It is the cultivation of a direct, penetrating insight into the nature of existence, the insight that has the power to uproot the deep causes of our suffering, ignorance, and craving once and for all. This supreme training consists of the remaining 2 path factors: right view and right intention. It is crucial to understand that these 3 trainings and their 8 factors are not a linear sequence. You do not perfect sila, then graduate to samadhi, and finally attain pana. They are like the strands of a single powerful rope, each one intertwined with and strengthening all the others. For example, your commitment to right speech, sila, is supported by your practice of right mindfulness, samadhi, which allows you to notice a harmful impulse before you speak. The insight gained from right view, pana, reinforces your commitment to right action, sila, as you understand more deeply the consequences of your actions. It is a complete, dynamic, and integrated system for living. Let us now briefly introduce each of these 8 beautiful strands. We begin with the training in wisdom. 1. Right view is the compass for the entire journey. It is seeing the world and ourselves clearly, understanding the nature of dukkha, its cause, its cessation, and this very path. 2. Right intention is the quality of our heart and mind. It is the conscious cultivation of thoughts rooted in kindness, compassion, and the desire to let go of clinging. Next, the training in ethical conduct. 3. Right speech is using our words to heal, not to harm. It means speaking truthfully, avoiding gossip and divisive language, and refraining from harsh or idle chatter. 4. Right action is aligning our behavior with our compassionate intentions. It is acting in ways that protect life, respect the property of others, and honor relationships with integrity. 5. Right livelihood is earning a living in a way that is honorable and does not cause harm to any living being. And finally, the training in mental discipline. 6. Right effort is the gentle and wise application of our energy. It is the persistence required to cultivate wholesome states of mind and to let go of unwholesome ones. T. Right mindfulness is the art of being fully present. It is the moment-to-moment, non-judgmental awareness of our body, our feelings, our mind, and the world around us. 8. Right concentration is the fruit of this training, the ability to unify the mind and rest it upon a single object, leading to states of profound calm, stability, and clarity. This is the medicine, the Noble Eightfold Path. It is a complete prescription for the healing of the human heart. It is a path that calls not for blind belief, but for courageous exploration. It offers us a way to live with integrity, to cultivate a mind that is serene and strong, and to develop the wisdom that liberates. Like any great journey, it begins with a single, crucial first step. On this path, that first step is to ensure our map is oriented correctly, that our compass is pointing toward true north. It begins, therefore, with right view. Here, at the very entrance to the path, we find its cornerstone, its guiding light, and its ultimate destination. This is the first factor, sama ditthi, or right view. To understand the significance of this starting point, we must first clarify what right means in this context. It does not mean correct in a rigid, dogmatic sense, as opposed to someone else's wrong view. It is not about winning an argument or adhering to a creed. Right here is used in the sense of a wheel that is true and aligned, allowing for a smooth and efficient journey. It means seeing things in a way that is in harmony with reality, a view that is conducive to wisdom, and liberation. Right view is the accurate map of the human condition. To travel with a faulty map is to invite confusion, to get lost in swamps of delusion, and to walk off the cliffs of suffering. To travel with an accurate map is to move with confidence, clarity, and purpose toward our destination. It is essential to understand that right view is not a belief system to be passively accepted. The Buddha consistently discouraged blind faith, urging his followers to see for themselves. Right view, therefore, begins as a working hypothesis, a conceptual framework that we are invited to investigate and verify through our own direct experience. It is the difference between reading a detailed menu and actually tasting the food. The menu is useful, it points the way, but it offers no nourishment. The path is not about memorizing the menu, it is about tasting the food. The practices of mindfulness and meditation are the very methods of tasting, of turning the conceptual understanding of right view into a lived, embodied wisdom. In its most fundamental form, right view is the clear and thorough understanding of the very framework we have been exploring, the Four Noble Truths. It is the honest seeing of dukkha, the unsatisfactoriness woven into our lives. It is the penetrating insight into its cause, the relentless thirst of tanha. It is the liberating recognition that a cure is possible, the state of nirodha. And it is the confident acceptance of the Noble Eightfold Path as the practical method to achieve that cure. To hold this view is to orient your life away from the haphazard pursuit of fleeting pleasures and the frantic avoidance of pain, and to turn it instead toward the noble project of awakening. It is the conscious decision to stop being a victim of your circumstances and to become an investigator of your own reality. As we walk the path, this conceptual understanding deepens into a direct, experiential insight into the three fundamental characteristics of all existence, known as the three marks of existence. The first of these is anicca, or impermanence. We may think we understand this intellectually. Of course, we know that seasons change, people age, and nothing lasts forever. But right view is a much deeper seeing of impermanence. Through mindful observation, we begin to witness the truth of radical, moment-to-moment change in our own experience. We see that a thought is not a solid thing, but a fleeting energetic event that appears from nowhere and vanishes just as quickly. We feel a pleasant sensation, and we watch it dissolve. An unpleasant emotion arises, and we witness its inevitable decay. We see that our very body is not a static object, but a dynamic process of ceaseless flux. To see this is to understand at a gut level that there is nothing to cling to. Trying to build a permanent home of happiness on the foundation of impermanent things is the very definition of suffering. Right view is not a pessimistic resignation to this fact. It is a wise recognition that allows us to hold our experiences, our relationships, and our lives with a lighter, more graceful touch. The second mark is dukkha, which we have already explored as the first noble truth. In the context of right view, it is the clear seeing that any conditioned phenomenon, precisely because it is impermanent, cannot provide ultimate, lasting satisfaction. Any happiness that depends on an unstable condition is itself unstable and therefore, in a subtle way, unsatisfactory. This is not to deny the existence of joy or beauty, but to see its transient nature clearly and to not demand from it a permanence it cannot offer. The third and most transformative mark of existence is anatta, or not self. This is perhaps the most challenging yet liberating teaching in this tradition. It does not mean that you do not exist. You are here reading these words, breathing, thinking. What it means is that within this complex psychophysical process that you call you, there is no permanent, independent, unchanging core, no little I sitting in a control room behind your eyes. What we call the self is in reality a dynamic and interdependent process, a convergence of form, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, all of which are in a state of constant flux, like the patterns in a flowing river. The belief in a solid, separate self is the deepest illusion, the root of our defensiveness, our pride, our fear of annihilation, and our sense of alienation from others. When someone criticizes us, it is this phantom self that feels wounded. When we are consumed by pride, it is this phantom self that we are inflating. The cultivation of right view is the gradual seeing through of this illusion, and to see through it is to put down the heaviest burden you have ever carried, a burden so familiar you never even knew you were carrying it. There is a famous parable that illustrates the difference between wrong view and right view. A king once brought an elephant into his courtyard and assembled a group of men who had been blind from birth. He asked them to touch the elephant and describe it. The first man touched the elephant's leg and declared, "An elephant is like a great pillar." The next man touched the trunk and said, "No, an elephant is like a thick, writhing snake." A third touched the ear and insisted, "You are both wrong. An elephant is like a large, rough fan." Another touched the tail and described it as a rope, and one touched the tusk and described it as a hard, smooth spear. Because each man mistook his own limited, partial experience for the whole truth, they began to argue and fight. In this story, we are the blind men. Wrong view is clinging to our limited, conditioned perspective as the absolute truth. It is the source of all conflict, from personal arguments to global wars. The practice of the path is what gradually restores our sight. Right view is the perspective of the person who can see, who can look at the entire elephant and understand how the pillar-like leg, the snake-like trunk, and the fan-like ear are all true, but partial aspects of a much greater reality. The healing power of this clear seeing cannot be overstated. When we truly begin to integrate the view of impermanence, we become less fixated on our successes and less devastated by our failures. We can savor the joys of life without the anxious desperation of trying to make them last forever. When we begin to see through the illusion of the separate self, we take things less personally. We are less easily offended. Our need to be right, to defend our ego, begins to soften, and in its place, a natural compassion arises. For we see that all other beings are caught in the very same illusion, defending their own phantom selves just as desperately as we once did. Right view, therefore, is the lens that corrects our faulty vision. It is the light that guides our first steps on the path, and it is the sun of wisdom that we find at the journey's end. It is the foundational understanding that suffering exists, it has a cause, it has an end, and there is a way to that end. And when one truly sees the world through this clear lens, when the map is held correctly in one's hands, the next step becomes obvious. The traveler with the accurate map will naturally form the intention to follow the safe road. The heart begins to align with the mind's newfound clarity. And so, from the foundation of right view, arises the second factor of the path, right intention. If right view is the accurate map that shows us the terrain of reality, then right intention is the firm and skillful hand on the steering wheel, consciously choosing our direction. It is the crucial bridge between seeing and doing, between understanding and living. A map, no matter how precise, is useless if it is left folded in a drawer. Right intention, or samma sankappa, is the decision to unfold the map and begin the journey. It is the process of aligning our inner world, our thoughts, our motives, our deepest aspirations with the clear-seeing wisdom of right view. Before a single word is spoken, before a single action is taken, there is a subtle stirring in the mind, a flicker of purpose, an intention. This is the headwater from which the great river of our life flows. To purify the river, we must go to its source. The entire moral and spiritual quality of our lives is determined not by our actions in isolation, but by the intentions that give them birth. A surgeon and a murderer may both wield a knife and cut into flesh, but the surgeon acts with an intention to heal, while the murderer acts with an intention to harm. The outer actions may appear similar, but their inner worlds, their karmic significance, are universes apart. Right intention, therefore, is not a passive wish or a vague hope. It is the active and deliberate cultivation of the thoughts and motives that lead to liberation, and the simultaneous, gentle abandonment of those that lead back into the prison of suffering. It is nothing less than learning to think like a free person. This training of the heart and mind is traditionally divided into three sublime aspirations: each one a direct antidote to the poisons that fuel our dukkha. The first of these is the intention of renunciation, or nekama. This is the direct and powerful counterforce to the grasping, clinging thirst of tanha. The word renunciation can sound severe to the modern ear, conjuring images of self-deprivation, of giving up all worldly pleasures to live a life of stark austerity. While that may be its expression in a monastic context, for us, living in the world, its meaning is more subtle, more psychological, and infinitely more practical. It is the renunciation of attachment. It is the wise and liberating intention to let go. It is the conscious decision to find happiness not in adding more, but in needing less. We can begin by cultivating a renunciation of our attachment to sense pleasures. We live in a world that is a grand cathedral to craving, where every advertisement, every algorithm, every cultural message tells us that happiness is just one more purchase away, one more experience away, one more like away. We are conditioned to be hungry ghosts, forever seeking the next hit of pleasure, the next dose of distraction. The intention of renunciation is the beginning of seeing through this great illusion. It is looking at the offered salt water of consumerism and recognizing that it will never quench our thirst. It is the choice to step off the hedonic treadmill. This doesn't mean you cannot enjoy a beautiful sunset, a delicious meal, or a piece of music. On the contrary, when you are not desperately clinging to the experience, demanding that it last forever or deliver some ultimate fulfillment, you are free to enjoy it more fully for what it is, a beautiful, fleeting gift. This intention might manifest as a digital detox, a conscious period of unplugging from the endless stream of stimulation to rediscover the peace of your own inner world. It might manifest as an embrace of minimalism, a joyful simplifying of your surroundings, realizing that every object you own also owns a piece of your attention. It is the profound discovery that the more you let go of, the lighter and freer you become. This intention of renunciation extends even more deeply to our attachment to views, opinions, and the very concept of I am right. In our deeply polarized world, we can see the immense suffering caused by the desperate clinging to ideologies. We build our identities around our beliefs, and when those beliefs are challenged, we feel as if our very self is under attack. We enter conversations not to understand, but to win, to defend our position at all costs. The intention of renunciation in this context is a radical act of peace. It is the willingness to hold our views lightly. It is the humility to recognize that our perspective, like that of the blind men touching the elephant, is always partial. It means prioritizing connection over correctness and compassion over being right. It is the deep understanding that peace of mind is a far greater treasure than the fleeting satisfaction of winning an argument. To cultivate this, we can practice simply listening, truly listening to someone with a different viewpoint without formulating our rebuttal. We can practice adding the mental tag, "This is my view for now," to our strongest opinions, acknowledging their provisional nature. We can practice the generosity of giving another person the space to be themselves without needing them to conform to our expectations. Each act of letting go, whether it's letting go of a material craving or a rigid opinion, is a powerful training in freedom. The second stream of right intention is the intention of goodwill, or abhyapada. This is the direct antidote to the poison of ill will, aversion, anger, and hatred. While renunciation is about letting go of the things we crave, goodwill is about transforming our relationship with the things we hate and reject. Abhyapada means, quite literally, non-ill will. It is the active, conscious cultivation of a heart that wishes well for all beings without exception. Anger, resentment, and bitterness are some of the most toxic states the human mind can experience. The Buddha famously said that holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. This ancient wisdom is now being validated by modern science, which shows the devastating effect that chronic anger and hostility have on our physical and mental health. Ill will is a form of self-torture. It clouds our judgment, robs us of our peace, and cuts us off from genuine human connection. The intention of goodwill is the decision to stop drinking this poison. There is a timeless story told in many cultures that perfectly illustrates this inner work. An elder is teaching his grandchild, saying, "Inside of me there is a terrible fight going on between two wolves. One wolf is hatred, anger, envy, greed, arrogance, and resentment. The other wolf is love, joy, peace, kindness, generosity, and compassion. The same fight is going on inside of you, and inside every other person too." The grandchild thought about this for a minute, and then asked, "Grandfather, which wolf will win?" The old man simply replied, "The one you feed." Right intention is the conscious and deliberate act of feeding the wolf of love. Every time you find your mind replaying an old grievance, indulging in a fantasy of revenge, or bathing in resentful thoughts, you are feeding the wolf of hatred. The intention of goodwill is the practice of noticing this and gently but firmly withdrawing your attention from that toxic food source and instead offering the mind something nourishing. This is where the formal practice of metta, or loving kindness meditation, becomes an invaluable tool. It is a systematic method for feeding the wolf of love. In this practice, we begin by offering wishes of well-being to ourselves, recognizing that we cannot share from an empty cup. We repeat phrases like, "May I be safe, may I be healthy, may I be happy, may I live with ease." Then, we gradually extend this benevolent intention outward, first to a respected teacher or benefactor, then to a beloved friend, then to a neutral person we don't feel strongly about. And then comes the most challenging and transformative part of the practice. We extend these same wishes to a difficult person, someone with whom we have conflict. This is not about condoning their harmful actions or forcing a superficial forgiveness. It is a pragmatic recognition that our hatred for them is a hot coal in our own hand. It is for our own sake, for the sake of our own peace, that we practice wishing them well. It is the brave act of starving the wolf of hatred and feeding the wolf of peace, until its voice becomes the strongest one within us. The third and final stream of right intention is the intention of harmlessness, or avihimsa. This is the direct antidote to cruelty, aggression, and violence. If goodwill is the wish for others to be happy, harmlessness is the wish for them to be free from suffering. It is the heart's natural response when it sees the dukkha in another being. This is the intention that gives rise to true compassion, karuna. Like the other intentions, harmlessness extends far beyond its most obvious physical manifestations. We may not engage in physical violence, but do we cause harm with our words? Do we use sarcasm that stings, gossip that ruins reputations, or criticism that demoralizes? That is a form of harm. Do our consumption habits support industries that exploit workers or destroy ecosystems? That is a form of harm. Do we treat the natural world as a resource to be plundered, or as a living system of which we are a part? The intention of harmlessness is a deep, all-encompassing commitment to tread lightly on the earth and to be a source of safety and refuge for all life. It is the recognition of our profound interconnectedness. Compassion, the flower of this intention, is often misunderstood as pity. Pity creates distance. It looks down from a position of superiority. Compassion closes the distance. It recognizes the shared nature of our vulnerability. Pity says, "Oh, you poor thing." Compassion says, "I know this pain." It is the quivering of the heart in the face of suffering, not out of fear, but out of love. It is what arises when our right view sees the truth of dukkha, not just as a philosophical concept, but as a living reality in the lives of those around us, and our right intention responds with a powerful, active wish. May you be free from this suffering. To cultivate this intention, we can practice active empathy. When we are in a disagreement, we can pause and genuinely try to imagine the world from the other person's perspective. What are their fears? What are their needs? What is the first arrow that has struck them, causing them to act in this way? We can reflect on the truth of our interdependence, seeing how our well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of the farmer who grew our food, the worker who assembled our phone, and the bee that pollinates the plants. Every living being in some way, contributes to our existence. The intention of harmlessness is the natural and grateful response to this profound truth. These three intentions of renunciation, of goodwill, and of harmlessness are the guiding stars of our inner life. They are the work we do in the silent laboratory of our own mind. To cultivate them is to become a gardener of the heart. The intention of renunciation is the diligent work of pulling the weeds of grasping and clinging which choke the life from the soil. The intention of goodwill is the joyful work of planting beautiful flowers, filling the garden with the vibrant color and sweet fragrance of loving kindness. And the intention of harmlessness is the careful work of building a strong fence around our garden, protecting its tender shoots from the harsh winds of cruelty and aggression. This is not a one-time decision, but a moment-to-moment practice of gentle, persistent redirection. It is learning to steer the river of thought away from the dark and narrow canyons of greed, hatred, and delusion, and guiding it out into the vast, sunlit ocean of freedom, kindness, and compassion. When this inner reorientation begins to take hold, when the garden of the mind begins to flourish, this inner beauty cannot be contained. It inevitably seeks expression, and the first, most immediate, and most powerful way our inner world manifests outwardly is through the gateway of our speech. The purified intention naturally flows into purified communication, leading us directly to the next step on the path, right speech. From the wellspring of a purified intention, the first stream to flow out into the world is our speech. Words, though seemingly intangible, are one of the most powerful forces we wield. They are actions in themselves, capable of building empires of trust or reducing hearts to ruins. A word of encouragement can change a person's entire day, or even their entire life. A careless, cruel word can leave a scar that lasts for decades, long after a physical wound would have healed. Our speech is the architecture of our relationships and the very fabric of our social reality. Recognizing this immense power, the Noble Eightfold Path places right speech, samaveka, as the first pillar of ethical conduct. It is the practice of transforming our communication from an unconscious habit into a conscious, compassionate, and wise art form. It asks us to bring the same mindfulness we cultivate in meditation to every conversation, every email, every text message, every online comment. Right speech is defined not just by what we say, but also by what we choose not to say. And it is guided by four clear and practical principles. The first principle of right speech is to abstain from false speech, or musavada. At its most basic level, this is a commitment to telling the truth, but its scope is far broader than simply avoiding outright lies. It is an invitation to cultivate a radical honesty in all our communications. This includes the subtle forms of falsehood we often employ for social convenience or self-promotion. It means refraining from exaggeration to make a story more dramatic or to make ourselves seem more important. It means avoiding the white lies we tell to avoid minor discomfort, which often weave a tangled web that requires more lies to maintain. It means being true to our word and not making promises we cannot or do not intend to keep. The practice of truthfulness is a profound act of self-respect. Every time we speak dishonestly, we create a fracture within ourselves, a misalignment between our inner knowledge and our outer expression. This inner conflict erodes our own sense of integrity and peace. Conversely, when we commit to truthfulness, we become whole. Our inner and outer worlds align. Life becomes remarkably simple, for there is nothing to remember, nothing to cover up. We become a reliable presence in the world, a person whose word can be trusted, and this creates a foundation of deep security for both ourselves and those we interact with. The second principle is to abstain from divisive or slanderous speech, pisunavaka. This is speech that poisons relationships by setting one person against another. It is the act of carrying tales, of speaking ill of someone behind their back, of spreading rumors and engaging in gossip. We live in a culture that often thrives on this kind of communication. It can be found in the whispers of office politics, the drama of social circles, and the vast, echoing chambers of the internet. There is a perverse pleasure, a fleeting sense of intimacy, that can come from bonding with one person over a shared dislike of another. But this intimacy is hollow, built on a foundation of negativity. It fosters an environment of suspicion and fear, for if someone will gossip with us, they will surely gossip about us. This principle calls on us to become agents of harmony. It asks us to make a conscious choice not to participate in conversations that tear others down. It is the discipline to keep a silent tongue when we hear a rumor, and the courage to speak up for someone who is being unfairly maligned. In our modern digital age, this principle is more vital than ever. It means refraining from piling on in online shaming campaigns and resisting the allure of political rhetoric that seeks to demonize and dehumanize those with different views. Right speech here is the choice to use our words to build bridges of understanding, not to dig trenches of division. The third principle is to abstain from harsh speech, pharosavaka. This is the practice of abandoning words intended to cause pain. This includes the obvious forms of verbal aggression, yelling, insulting, cursing, and threatening. But it also encompasses the more subtle, yet equally venomous, forms of harshness. It is the biting sarcasm that masquerades as humor, the condescending tone that belittles, the passive-aggressive comment that leaves a sting of unspoken resentment. Harsh speech is a second arrow we fire directly into the heart of another. It triggers defensiveness, escalates conflict, and shuts down any possibility of genuine communication. Its wounds are deep and they fester. Many of us can still recall, with perfect clarity, a harsh word spoken to us in childhood, a word that has shaped our self-perception for years. The antidote to harsh speech is not weak speech, but skillful speech. It is possible to communicate difficult truths, to disagree, to set boundaries, and to express dissatisfaction with complete honesty, but to do so with a gentle and compassionate heart. It is the art of choosing words that are, as the Buddha said, welcome, pleasing to the ear, and endearing, that go to the heart. Before speaking, especially in a moment of anger, we can pause and ask ourselves, are my words kind? Are they helpful? Is this the right time? This simple pause can be the difference between an act of violence and an act of healing. The fourth and final principle is to abstain from idle chatter, samphapalapa. This is pointless, aimless, and frivolous talk that serves no real purpose other than to fill silence or to distract the mind from the present moment. This is not a condemnation of lighthearted conversation or joyful connection. It is an invitation to value our own attention and the attention of others as a precious resource. So much of our daily conversation is simply mental restlessness made audible. It is a running commentary on trivialities, a regurgitation of things we have seen or heard, a way to avoid the intimacy and sometimes the discomfort of genuine, silent presence. To refrain from idle chatter is to cultivate a mind that is more settled and a speech that is more purposeful. It encourages us to ask ourselves, is what I am about to say meaningful? Does it add value to this moment? Often we will find that it does not. In these moments, we can discover the fifth, unspoken principle of right speech, noble silence. There is a profound wisdom in knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. In a moment of conflict, silence can prevent escalation. When someone is grieving, silent presence can be far more comforting than a string of empty platitudes. Silence allows for listening, for reflection, and for a deeper connection to the present moment. The story is told of a man who came to the Buddha and began to insult him with a torrent of harsh and abusive words. The Buddha listened patiently and silently until the man had finished. Then he asked him, "My friend, if you prepare a generous gift for someone and that person does not accept it, to whom does the gift then belong?" The man, surprised, replied, "Well, it would still belong to me." The Buddha smiled gently and said, "Exactly so. You have offered me a gift of insults and anger. I do not accept it." This simple story contains a universe of wisdom. It teaches us that we have ultimate sovereignty over our own inner peace. We cannot control the words that others hurl at us, but we have complete freedom in how we respond. We do not have to accept their gift of negativity. Ultimately, right speech is a practice of profound mindfulness. It is the recognition that our words are a direct printout of the state of our mind. When the mind is agitated, judgmental, and full of craving, our speech will be scattered, critical, and manipulative. But as we cultivate the inner qualities of right view and right intention, our speech naturally begins to transform. As our mind fills with clarity and our heart with kindness, our words become clearer, kinder, and more beneficial. They become a force for good in the world, an expression of our deepest wisdom and our most sincere compassion. As we learn to bring this conscious integrity to what we say, it is a natural and seamless step to extend that same integrity to what we do. The ethical foundation we build with our words paves the way for the next factor of the path, right action. As the clarity of our intention settles in our hearts, it naturally seeks to express itself not only through our words, but through the entirety of our physical presence in the world. Our actions are our intentions made solid. They are the choices we enact, the way we move through the lives of others, and the most tangible impact we have on the world around us. Right action, or samma kammanta, is the second pillar of ethical conduct, and it is the practice of aligning our bodily actions with our deepest aspirations for wisdom and compassion. It is the commitment to making our every deed a reflection of a harmless and helpful heart. Like the other path factors, this is not a rigid list of external rules to be blindly obeyed, but a wise and compassionate guide to living in a way that eliminates the causes of conflict, remorse, and suffering for ourselves and all beings. Right action is traditionally defined by three core principles, each a profound area for mindful investigation in our modern lives. The first principle of right action is to abstain from the taking of life, panatipata. This is the great and foundational precept of nonviolence, the unwavering commitment to protect life and to cause no harm. In its most direct interpretation, it is the vow to refrain from killing any living being, from a human to the smallest insect. This principle arises from a deep recognition of the preciousness of life and the inherent desire of every creature to live and to avoid pain. But in our complex, interconnected global society, the spirit of this principle extends far beyond the direct act of killing. It invites us to investigate the vast and often hidden chains of consequence that result from our daily actions. It becomes a practice of radical harmlessness. When we purchase goods, are we supporting industries that thrive on the suffering of animals in factory farms, or that exploit human labor in unsafe conditions? When we consume, are we contributing to the destruction of vital ecosystems that are home to countless species? Right action calls on us to become conscious consumers, to make choices that, as much as possible, align with our intention not to cause harm. It also calls us to a deeper environmental ethic. It asks us to see the planet not as an inert resource to be exploited, but as a vast, living system of which we are an inseparable part. To pollute our rivers, to clear-cut our forests, to destabilize our climate, these are all forms of taking life on a massive scale. The intention of harmlessness, therefore, blossoms into a profound sense of ecological responsibility, a commitment to protecting and preserving the web of life that sustains us all. The second principle is to abstain from taking what is not given, adinadana. At its core, this means refraining from stealing the physical property of others. It is a fundamental commitment to honesty and respect, without which no society can function harmoniously. To honor this principle is to cultivate a mind free from the greed and envy that lead to theft, and to enjoy the peace that comes from living with integrity, with nothing to hide. But here again, the spirit of the precept invites us to look more deeply at the subtle ways we might take what is not given in our daily lives. In the digital age, this principle extends clearly to intellectual property. When we pirate software, illegally download music or movies, or plagiarize the work of another, we are taking the fruits of their labor without their consent. We are failing to respect their creative efforts. This principle can even be applied to more intangible resources, like time. Are we respectful of the time of others? Or do we steal it through chronic lateness or by monopolizing conversations for our own self-interest? In the world of commerce and finance, this precept calls for absolute transparency and fairness. It means conducting business without deception, paying employees a fair wage, fulfilling contractual obligations, and paying our fair share of taxes that support the community. It is the opposite of the mindset that constantly seeks to exploit loopholes and gain an advantage at the expense of others. To practice this principle fully is to cultivate a spirit of generosity, a contentment with what we have, and a deep respect for the well-being and property of others, fostering a world built on trust rather than on suspicion. The third principle of right action is to abstain from sexual misconduct, kamesu mikakara. This is the practice of bringing mindfulness, kindness, honesty, and respect into our most intimate relationships. In a modern context, it is helpful to understand this principle not as a rigid set of culturally specific rules, but as a clear and compassionate guideline for avoiding harm in the realm of sexuality. The essence of this precept is to ensure that our sexual expression is never a source of suffering for ourselves or for others. The foundation of right action in this domain is built upon the pillars of mutual consent, deep honesty, and genuine care. Consent must be enthusiastic, clear, and ongoing. Honesty means refraining from any form of deceit, most obviously the profound harm caused by infidelity, which shatters trust and creates deep emotional wounds. Kindness means being attuned to the well-being of our partner and never treating another person as a mere object for our own gratification or as a means to an end. Sexual misconduct, therefore, is any sexual act that is rooted in exploitation, coercion, or deceit. It is taking advantage of a power imbalance or acting in a way that disregards the emotional and physical safety of another. By committing to this principle, we vow to ensure that our sexual energy is an expression of connection, vulnerability, and shared respect, rather than a manifestation of craving, ego, and the potential for causing deep and lasting harm. The transformative power of this path is beautifully illustrated in the story of Angulimala, whose name meant finger necklace. He was a terrifying bandit who stalked the roads, murdering travelers and collecting one of their fingers to add to the gruesome garland he wore. He had become a source of immense fear and suffering. One day, the Buddha walked calmly and mindfully along the very road that Angulimala terrorized. Angulimala saw him and began to run after him, but no matter how fast he ran, he could not catch up to the Buddha, who was walking at a normal pace. Exasperated, Angulimala shouted, "Stop, monk!" The Buddha, still walking, replied, "I have stopped, Angulimala. It is you who have not stopped." These words struck Angulimala with the force of lightning. He understood at once that the Buddha had stopped the endless cycle of violence and hatred, while he himself was still running, trapped on the wheel of causing suffering. In that moment of profound insight, he threw down his weapons, bowed at the Buddha's feet, and asked to become a monk. Despite facing anger and violence from the families of his past victims, Angulimala cultivated the path with diligence, transforming his heart so completely that he became a fully awakened being, a symbol of gentleness and peace. This story teaches us that our past actions, no matter how terrible, do not have to define our future. The choice to practice right action is available to us in every moment, and it holds the power to redeem and transform even the most broken life. These three principles, harmlessness, honesty, and sexual integrity, form a complete and beautiful practice of living with integrity. They are not limitations on our freedom, but are in fact the very conditions for true freedom. Freedom from remorse, freedom from fear, and freedom from the endless conflicts that arise from unethical behavior. Our actions are the seeds we plant in the world. When we act with mindfulness and compassion, we plant the seeds of peace, trust, and happiness for all. As we learn to bring this profound sense of integrity to our personal actions, it naturally leads us to examine the arena where we spend the majority of our waking hours, our work. How we earn our living, how we participate in the machinery of society, must also be brought into the light of the Dharma. This consideration leads us directly to the next factor of the path, right livelihood. Having brought the light of mindfulness to our speech and our personal actions, we now arrive at the domain that occupies the vast majority of our waking hours, the arena where our skills, energy, and time are most intensely focused, our work. For most of us, our livelihood is more than just a way to pay the bills. It is a central part of our identity and our primary contribution to the society we inhabit. The Noble Eightfold Path recognizes this profound significance by dedicating a specific factor to it, sama ajiva, or right livelihood. This is the third and final pillar of the training in ethical conduct, or sila. It is the practice of integrating our spiritual journey with our professional life, ensuring that the way we earn our living is not a source of conflict with our deepest values, but rather an expression of them. Right livelihood asks us to honestly examine the question, does my work serve as a field for practice, a way to cultivate wisdom and compassion, or is it an obstacle, a source of harm that depletes my integrity and contributes to the suffering of the world? The fundamental principle of right livelihood is the same one that underpins right action, the principle of non-harming. At its core, it is a commitment to engage in a profession that does not, by its very nature, cause harm to oneself or to other living beings. The Buddha, in his teachings, specifically identified 5 types of trade that should be avoided by anyone seeking to walk this path. These were, first, dealing in weapons, for it is a business that profits directly from violence and death. Second, dealing in living beings, which included slavery, prostitution, and the raising of animals for slaughter, all of which involve the exploitation and commodification of life. Third, the meat industry, which is predicated on the act of killing. Fourth, dealing in intoxicants, such as alcohol and drugs, which lead to heedlessness, addiction, and the loss of self-control. And fifth, dealing in poisons, substances whose sole purpose is to harm or to kill. These ancient prohibitions are not arbitrary rules. They point to a timeless and profound principle. One should not derive one's sustenance from that which brings suffering, delusion, or death to others. In our vastly more complex modern economy, the spirit of these 5 precepts must be translated and expanded to meet the challenges of our time. The principle of non-harming asks us to look with unflinching honesty at the industries that shape our world. Dealing in weapons today might include not only manufacturing guns, but also designing software for military drones, creating algorithms for surveillance states, or working within the broader military-industrial complex. The prohibition against dealing in intoxicants could be extended to industries that knowingly profit from addiction, such as the gambling industry, or even aspects of the attention economy, where technology is explicitly designed to be compulsive and to foster a state of constant distraction. The trade in poisons could be seen in companies that pollute our environment with toxic chemicals, or in the marketing of products known to be deeply harmful to human health, such as the tobacco industry or the purveyors of highly processed junk food. And we might add new categories of livelihood that cause subtle yet pervasive harm in the modern world. Is one engaged in predatory finance, profiting from the crippling debt of the most vulnerable? Is one's work in advertising or public relations based on creating artificial needs and fostering discontent, essentially fueling the fire of Tana on a mass scale? Does one's career depend on the spread of misinformation, on an economy of outrage that polarizes society and erodes our shared sense of truth? The guiding question for right livelihood is always the same. What is the fruit of my labor? Does my work contribute to the health, wisdom, and genuine well-being of individuals and society? Or does it, however indirectly, contribute to the proliferation of greed, hatred, and delusion in the world? This line of inquiry can be daunting. Not everyone has the economic freedom to simply quit a job that feels compromised and find another that is perfectly pure. For many, the practice of right livelihood is less about an immediate change of career and more about a radical change in the attitude and intention we bring to the work we already do. The path is often found not in what you do, but in how you do it. Imagine 2 carpenters standing side by side building the same house. The first works with resentment, his mind complaining about his boss, his tools, and the ache in his back. He works only for the paycheck, and his day is a long stretch of suffering. The second carpenter works with a quiet, focused attention. He feels the grain of the wood under his hands. He takes pride in a joint perfectly made. He treats his tools with respect. He has transformed his labor into a meditation. He is not just building a house, he is building his own character. His work, no matter how humble, becomes a source of dignity and presence. This is a choice available to nearly everyone. We can transform our workplace into a monastery of practice. We can practice right speech in our interactions with colleagues, customers, and clients, choosing kindness over criticism and harmony over conflict. We can practice right action by maintaining a scrupulous honesty in all our dealings, by being reliable, and by refusing to cut corners. We can practice generosity by helping a coworker who is struggling, by mentoring someone new, or by simply offering a calm and reassuring presence in a stressful environment. By bringing our practice to work, we not only protect our own integrity, but we can become a subtle, positive influence, a small island of sanity and kindness in what might be a turbulent sea. Of course, there are gray areas. What if your company produces a beneficial product, but its manufacturing processes are harmful to the environment? What if your colleagues are unethical? These situations require wisdom and courage. Right livelihood is not always a clear-cut choice between a good job and a bad job. It is a path of constant reflection and skillful navigation. It might mean having the courage to speak up and advocate for more ethical practices within your organization. It might mean consciously deciding to develop new skills that will allow for a career transition in the future. The vital element is the honesty of our self-assessment and the sincerity of our intention to move, step by step, toward a way of life that is more whole and less divided. With right livelihood, the training in ethical conduct, or sila, is now complete. When our speech, our physical actions, and our professional lives are all guided by the principles of non-harming, respect, and integrity, we create an outer life of remarkable peace and stability. We are no longer at war with ourselves or the world. This foundation of external peace and self-respect is not the end of the path, but it is an essential prerequisite for the deeper inner work that is to come. With our outer life settled, we can now turn our full, undivided attention to the direct training of the mind. This next stage of the journey, the cultivation of samadhi, requires a specific kind of focused energy and gentle persistence. It begins with the engine that will drive our practice forward: right effort. Having established a life of external integrity through right speech, right action, and right livelihood, we now turn inward. The training in ethical conduct, or sila, provides a stable ground, a cleared field upon which we can begin the deeper work of cultivating the mind itself. This next phase of the journey, the training in mental discipline, or samadhi, begins with its engine, its beating heart, the crucial factor of right effort, or sama vayama. The word effort can be misleading. In our culture of relentless striving and competition, we tend to associate effort with a kind of forceful, white-knuckled, grim determination. We imagine it as a struggle, a fight against our own nature. But right effort is something entirely different. It is skillful, it is intelligent, it is often gentle, and it can even be joyful. It is the energy of a wise gardener tending a beloved plot of land, not the energy of a soldier fighting a bloody battle. It is the consistent and joyful persistence that moves us along the path to liberation. To understand the quality of this effort, we can recall the lesson of the lute player Sona. An effort that is too forceful, too tense, and too strained is like a lute string pulled too tight. It creates agitation and restlessness, and eventually it snaps, leading to burnout and discouragement. This is the path of the spiritual striver who grits their teeth and tries to force their mind into submission, only to become frustrated and exhausted. On the other hand, an effort that is too slack, too lazy, and too complacent is like a lute string that is completely loose. It produces no sound at all. It leads to stagnation, dullness, and a mind that is easily overcome by its old, unwholesome habits. Right effort is the middle way between these two extremes. It is the art of tuning the mind to the perfect pitch, an energy that is relaxed yet alert, gentle yet unwavering, patient yet persistent. It is the steady, sustainable energy that can be maintained for the whole of the journey. This wise and balanced energy is not applied haphazardly. It is channeled through a brilliant and comprehensive strategy for mental cultivation, a four-part framework known as the Four Great Efforts. This is a complete system for mental hygiene, a practical guide for purifying the mind. The first of these is the effort to prevent the arising of unwholesome states that have not yet arisen. This is the most proactive and intelligent of the four efforts. It is the practice of guarding the gateways of our senses. It means cultivating a wise awareness of what we allow into our minds through our eyes, ears, and thoughts. We begin to recognize that certain inputs reliably trigger unwholesome states within us. Perhaps we notice that scrolling through a particular social media feed consistently gives rise to feelings of envy and inadequacy. Or maybe we find that listening to angry, divisive talk radio always stirs up feelings of resentment and ill will. The effort of prevention is the simple, compassionate wisdom to turn away from these triggers. It is not about censorship or hiding from the world, but about taking responsibility for our own mental environment. It is like knowing you have a vulnerability to frostbite and choosing to wear gloves before you go out into the snow. It is the skillful act of protecting our inner peace by not needlessly exposing ourselves to that which we know will disturb it. The second is the effort to abandon unwholesome states that have already arisen. Despite our best efforts at prevention, unwholesome states will inevitably arise. A sudden wave of anger, a pang of jealousy, a spiral of anxious thoughts. These are part of the human experience. The unskilled reaction is to either indulge the state, fanning the flames of anger with resentful thoughts, or to try and violently suppress it, pushing it down and pretending it isn't there. Both of these reactions strengthen the habit. Right effort offers a third way, a middle path of skillful intervention. It is the practice of first acknowledging the unwholesome state with mindfulness, without judgment. We see it clearly. Ah, anger is present. Then we gently but firmly withdraw our attention from it. We let go of the story that is feeding it, and we skillfully apply an antidote. If we are caught in anger, we might intentionally generate a thought of loving kindness. If we are lost in anxiety, we can bring our full attention to the physical sensation of the breath. If we are mired in self-pity, we can reflect on the kindness others have shown us. This is not a battle. It is a gentle redirection, a skillful letting go, like opening your hand to release a hot coal rather than trying to crush it. The third is the effort to arouse wholesome states that have not yet arisen. This is the joyful and creative aspect of the practice. It is the conscious cultivation of the good. Our minds can often fall into a state of dull neutrality or low-grade negativity. The effort to arouse is the intentional act of planting seeds of beauty and goodness in the soil of the mind. We can take a moment to deliberately reflect on our good fortune, to practice gratitude for the simple things in our life, the food we eat, the roof over our head, the presence of a friend. We can read a passage from an inspiring book, listen to a piece of uplifting music, or recall the qualities of someone we deeply admire. We can actively generate feelings of loving kindness, compassion, or sympathetic joy. This is not about pretending to feel something we don't. It is about knowing that just as we can choose to lift our arm, we can choose to incline our mind in a positive direction, creating the causes and conditions for wholesome states to arise naturally. The fourth and final of these is the effort to maintain and perfect wholesome states that have already arisen. When a moment of genuine peace, clarity, or compassion does arise, the untrained mind has a tendency to quickly move on, to get distracted by the next thought. This fourth effort is the wisdom to recognize a wholesome state when it appears, and to savor it, to nurture it, to let it flourish. When you feel a moment of calm, stay with it, explore its texture, feel how it resonates in your body. When a feeling of gratitude emerges, don't rush past it. Linger with it, allowing it to deepen and expand. By consciously attending to these positive states, we strengthen their neural pathways in our brain. We make them more familiar, more accessible, and more likely to become our mind's default state. We are actively conditioning our minds for happiness and peace. This fourfold practice can be perfectly understood through the metaphor of a gardener. The effort of prevention is like building a sturdy fence around your garden to keep out deer and other pests that would eat the tender plants. The effort of abandoning is the gentle but diligent work of seeing a weed when it sprouts and carefully removing it from the soil before it takes root and spreads. The effort of arousing is the joyful act of planting new seeds for beautiful flowers, nourishing vegetables, and fragrant herbs. And the effort of maintaining is the patient daily work of providing the right conditions for those plants to grow strong, watering them, making sure they get enough sunlight, and enriching the soil. The gardener does not scream at the weeds in anger, nor do they try to pull the sprouts up by force to make them grow faster. Their effort is wise, patient, and works in harmony with the laws of nature. This is the very quality of right effort we must bring to the garden of our own mind. Right effort is the intelligent and compassionate application of our energy. It replaces the violence of self-criticism and forceful suppression with the wisdom of skillful cultivation. It is the engine that drives us forward on the path, the gentle, persistent current that carries us toward the ocean of awakening. But for this engine to function effectively, for the gardener to know what to do, they need to be able to see the garden clearly. The gardener must be aware of when a weed has sprouted, when the soil is dry, when a plant needs more light. To apply these four efforts skillfully, we need a clear and constant awareness of what is happening in our minds from moment to moment. This essential faculty of knowing, this powerful tool of clear seeing, is the heart of the path. It is the practice of right mindfulness. If right effort is the gentle, persistent energy that moves us along the path, then right mindfulness is the light that illuminates the way. It is the heart of this entire journey, the central faculty that makes every other aspect of the path possible. Without mindfulness, our effort is blind, our view is clouded, our intentions are unconscious, and our actions are merely habitual. Right mindfulness, or samasati, is the art and science of being present. It is the simple yet revolutionary capacity to know what is happening while it is happening, without preference and without judgment. It is not, as is often misunderstood, an attempt to empty the mind or to stop our thoughts. The mind produces thoughts as the heart produces beats. That is its nature. Mindfulness is not a battle against the mind, but a compassionate observation of it. Imagine a perfect, clean mirror. It reflects whatever comes before it: a beautiful flower, a frightening face, a passing cloud, without altering, clinging to, or rejecting any of it. It simply shows what is there, with perfect clarity and fidelity. Mindfulness is the mirror of the mind. For most of our lives, we do not live in reality. We live in a dream world of thought, a constant inner monologue of memories, plans, worries, and fantasies. We drive to work and remember nothing of the journey. We eat a meal while lost in our phones, tasting nothing. We speak with our loved ones while our mind is a million miles away. We live on autopilot. Mindfulness is the radical act of waking up from this trance. It is the choice to arrive fully in the only moment we ever truly have, the present moment. To develop this profound skill, the Buddha offered a complete and systematic training ground, a comprehensive guide to exploring our own inner landscape. This is known as the 4 foundations of mindfulness. This is not a linear progression, but 4 interconnected fields of practice that together encompass the whole of our human experience. The first foundation, and the great anchor of the entire practice, is mindfulness of the body, or kayanupasana. We begin here because the body, unlike our thoughts, is always, unequivocally, in the present moment. Our mind can wander to the ancient past or the distant future, but the feeling of our feet on the floor, the sensation of air entering our nostrils, is always happening now. The body is our anchor to the real. The most common way to practice this is through mindfulness of breathing, or anapanasati. We sit in a comfortable, dignified posture, and we bring our gentle, curious attention to the natural, unforced rhythm of our breath. We feel the subtle sensation of the air as it passes over the tip of the nostrils or the upper lip. We notice the gentle rise of the abdomen on the in-breath and its soft fall on the out-breath. We are not trying to control the breath, to make it deeper or slower. We are simply resting our awareness on it, as a butterfly might rest on a flower. When the mind wanders, which it will, 1,000 times, we don't scold ourselves. The moment we realize we have wandered is a moment of mindfulness itself. In that moment, we gently, kindly, and without any drama, escort our attention back to the breath. This simple, repetitive act is a powerful form of mental training. It calms the nervous system, cultivates focus, and teaches us patience and self-compassion. From the breath, we expand our awareness to the body's posture. We simply know with bare awareness, I am sitting, or I am standing, or I am walking. This act, as simple as it sounds, grounds us in our physical reality and pulls us out of the disembodied world of abstract thought. We then extend this mindfulness to all our daily activities, transforming the mundane into the sacred. We practice mindful walking, feeling the complex sensations of lifting the foot, moving it through space, placing it down, and feeling the solidness of the earth beneath us. We practice mindful eating. Instead of shoveling down our food while watching a screen, we take a moment to truly see the colors and shapes on our plate. We notice the aroma. We take a bite and pay full attention to the textures and flavors in our mouth. In doing so, we not only enjoy our food more, but we cultivate a deep sense of gratitude for all the causes and conditions, the sun, the rain, the soil, the farmers that brought this nourishment to us. Through these practices, we begin to dismantle the notion of the body as just a static object we inhabit. We come to experience it directly as a living, breathing, dynamic process, a river of sensations in constant flux, intimately connected to the world around it. The second foundation is mindfulness of feelings, or Vedanana Upasana. Here, the word feeling does not refer to complex emotions like love or anger, but to the raw, immediate feeling, tone that accompanies every single moment of our experience. Every sight, every sound, every thought, every sensation comes with one of three simple labels: pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. This is the raw data of our experience before the mind weaves a story around it. And this is the critical juncture where dukkha is born. When an unpleasant feeling, RSS of pain in the knee during meditation, the sting of a critical word, a moment of anxiety or automatic, unconscious reaction is aversion. We want to push it away, to get rid of it. When a pleasant feeling arises, the taste of chocolate, the warmth of the sun, the feeling of praise or automatic reaction is craving and clinging. We want to hold on to it, to make it last, to get more of it. When a neutral feeling arises, our reaction is usually boredom or ignorance. We simply check out. Mindfulness of feelings is the practice of observing these feeling tones as they arise and pass away without automatically launching the second arrow of reaction. When an unpleasant feeling comes, we simply note unpleasant, and we meet it with a curious and accepting awareness. We investigate it. What does it actually feel like? Where is it in the body? Is it constant, or does it shift and change? By doing this, we learn that we can bear discomfort, and we discover for ourselves its impermanent nature. When a pleasant feeling comes, we note pleasant, and we enjoy it fully, but with a wisdom that knows it is fleeting, without the desperation of clinging. This practice is profoundly liberating. It directly cuts the chain of habitual reactivity at its source, allowing us to experience the richness of life without being a slave to our likes and dislikes. The third foundation is mindfulness of the mind itself, or Cittanupassana. Here, we turn the light of awareness back onto the mind that is aware. We begin to observe our own mental states as objects of consciousness. It is like learning to read the weather of our own mind. We learn to note with a detached clarity, the mind is feeling angry, or the mind is experiencing joy. We see, the mind is distracted and restless now, or the mind is calm and concentrated. We notice the presence of desire, the presence of doubt, the presence of compassion. The transformative insight that arises from this practice is the direct seeing of anatta, or not self. We begin to realize that these mental states are not me or mine. We are not an angry person. Rather, anger is a temporary energy, a conditioned phenomenon passing through the vast, open space of awareness. We are not a sad person. Sadness is a passing cloud in the sky of the mind. The sky is not the cloud. This disidentification is the very heart of freedom. It loosens the grip of our moods and emotions, allowing them to arise and pass away without defining us or controlling our actions. The fourth and final foundation is mindfulness of Dhammas, or Dhammanupassana. This is the most analytical of the practices, where we observe our experience through the clarifying frameworks of the Buddha's teachings, the Dhamma. It is about recognizing the universal patterns and principles that govern our inner world. A primary way to practice this is by observing our experience in terms of the five hindrances, the five energies that block our clarity and peace. We learn to see clearly when the mind is caught by 1. Sensual desire, the pull towards pleasure. 2. Ill will, the push of aversion and anger. 3. Sloth and torpor, the heavy fogginess of mental dullness and laziness. 4. Restlessness and worry, the agitated, buzzing energy of an anxious mind. And 5. Skeptical doubt, the indecisive, cynical mind that undermines our practice. By learning to name these hindrances, this is restlessness, or sloth and torpor is present, we immediately demystify them. They are no longer a personal failing, but an impersonal, recognizable pattern. Seeing them clearly is the first step to abandoning them. This foundation helps us to see not just the what of our experience, but the how and why. We see directly how sensual desire leads to dissatisfaction, how ill will destroys our peace, and how letting go of these hindrances leads directly to clarity and freedom. It is the cultivation of wisdom in real time. There is an ancient story that perfectly captures the quality of supreme mindfulness. A king once summoned a man and gave him a bowl, filled to the very brim with oil. He then ordered the man to carry this bowl through the crowded streets of the city. The streets were filled with distractions merchants, hawking their wares, musicians playing, beautiful dancers performing. The king then commanded the most fearsome executioner in the kingdom to follow behind the man with a massive, sharpened sword, and gave him this one instruction. If this man spills even a single drop of oil, you are to cut off his head on the spot. Now imagine being that man. How would you carry that bowl? You would walk with a total, unwavering, life or death concentration. The noisy crowd would fade into the background. The beautiful dancer would be invisible to you. Your entire universe would shrink to the feeling of the bowl in your hands and the shimmering, perfectly still surface of the oil. Your life would depend on your ability to remain completely in the present moment. In this story, the bowl of oil is our mindfulness. The distractions are the endless thoughts, desires, and fears that pull at our attention. And the executioner is the ever-present reality of dukkha, the suffering that results the moment our attention slips into heedlessness. Right mindfulness is the practice of carrying our attention with that same level of care, not out of fear, but out of a deep love for our own freedom. Mindfulness, in essence, is the practice of waking up. It is the steady, gentle light that allows right effort to be applied wisely. Its greatest gift is the creation of a sacred pause. In the space between a stimulus and our habitual reaction, mindfulness inserts a moment of clear seeing. In that precious space lies our power to choose. In that space, we can choose to let go of the second arrow. We can choose to respond to life's challenges with wisdom, compassion, and grace, rather than with unconscious, conditioned reactivity. As this mindful awareness becomes more stable and continuous, the scattered fragments of our attention begin to coalesce. The mind, which was once like a flickering candle flame, easily disturbed by any passing breeze, now becomes like a steady, powerful, and unwavering beam of light. This state of collected, unified, and luminous consciousness is the natural fruit of sustained mindfulness. It is the next great factor on the path, right concentration. Here we arrive at the culmination of our mental training, the beautiful and powerful fruit that grows from the sustained practice of right effort and right mindfulness. This is the eighth and final factor of the path, samasamadhi, or right concentration. When we apply a gentle and persistent effort to our mindfulness practice, returning our attention again and again to our chosen object, the mind, which was once a turbulent ocean, naturally begins to grow calm. The waves of distraction subside, the currents of thought slow down, and a profound stillness begins to emerge. Right concentration is this state of a collected, unified, and unwavering mind, resting peacefully and powerfully on a single point of focus. To understand this process, imagine you are holding a glass of water taken from a muddy river. It is cloudy, turbulent, and opaque. The sediment of your thoughts, worries, desires, and fears is constantly churned up, making it impossible to see clearly. This is the ordinary, untrained mind. The practice of right effort and right mindfulness is the act of placing this glass on a steady, stable surface and making the conscious decision to stop shaking it. Right concentration is what happens next. As the glass remains undisturbed, the laws of nature take over. The heavier particles of mud and grit, 5 hindrances of sensual desire, ill will, dullness, restlessness, and doubt slowly begin to drift downwards. They settle on the bottom, leaving the water above them increasingly transparent. The clarity that emerges is not something we have forced. We have simply created the conditions for the mind's natural luminosity to reveal itself. Samadhi is this state of crystal clear water, this mind that is calm, bright, and capable of seeing things just as they are. It is crucial to understand that this state of deep concentration is not a dull, trance-like, or unconscious state. It is, in fact, the very opposite. Right concentration is a state of profoundly heightened awareness, brimming with energy and lucidity. The mind is more awake, more vibrant, and more alive than ever before. The one-pointedness of mind, known as ekaggata, does not mean the mind has become narrow. It means all of its scattered energies, which were once dissipated in 1,000 different directions, are now gathered and flowing in a single, powerful, and coherent stream. Think of the difference between the diffuse, gentle light of a standard light bulb and the focused, penetrating power of a laser beam. Right concentration transforms the mind from a light bulb into a laser, capable of illuminating the deepest truths of existence. The journey into right concentration is often described as a progression through states of increasing depth and subtlety, known as the jhanas, or meditative absorptions. While these states can sound esoteric, they are a natural unfolding of the mind's potential for peace and clarity. In the first jhana, as the 5 hindrances settle, a profound sense of well-being arises. It is marked by the emergence of piti, which is a rapturous, joyful energy that can manifest as tingling, goosebumps, or a feeling of lightness in the body. Alongside it arises sukha, a deep, non-sensual happiness and contentment, a feeling of being perfectly at ease. This is the mind's first true taste of freedom from its usual burdens, a deep sigh of relief. As our concentration deepens further, we enter the second jhana. Here, the more active thinking processes of the mind begin to subside. The joy and happiness of the first jhana remain, but they are now even more profound, born not from the release from hindrances, but from the power of concentration itself. A deep inner confidence and unshakable tranquility emerge. The mind is gathered, unified, and rests in a state of radiant peace. In the third jhana, the more energetic and exciting quality of piti fades away, like a wave returning to the quiet depths of the ocean. What remains is the profound, all-pervading happiness of sukha, now accompanied by a powerful, mindful equanimity. The mind is utterly content, sober, and keenly aware, experiencing a deep and embodied sense of well-being that is calm and stable, free from all agitation. Finally, in the fourth jhana, even the subtle feeling of happiness falls away, and the mind enters a state of pure, sublime equanimity, or upekkha. All that is left is a luminous, perfectly still, and one-pointed awareness. The breath may become so subtle that it seems to have disappeared entirely. This is the state of the perfectly still lake, without a single ripple, reflecting the sky with absolute fidelity. The mind is now a flawless instrument, perfectly balanced, powerful, and prepared for the work of liberation. It is important to remember that these states are not the goal of the path in themselves. They are not spiritual trophies to be collected. They are a powerful means to an end, a way of preparing the mind for its ultimate task. The function of this exquisitely concentrated mind is twofold. First, it is a place of profound rest and healing. To be able to enter these states of deep peace is to have access to a sanctuary, a heavenly abiding that is available to us here and now. It is a way to recharge our spiritual batteries and to find refuge from the inevitable stresses and difficulties of life. But its second and ultimate purpose on the path is to serve as the unshakable platform for insight, or vipassana. A mind that has been sharpened into the laser beam of the fourth jhana possesses an unprecedented power of penetration. When this powerful, concentrated mind is turned towards the investigation of reality, it can see through the veils of ordinary perception. It can cut through the illusions of permanence and self that are the root cause of our suffering. The deep, unified calm of samadhi creates the stability, and the practice of insight, vipassana, uses that stability to see the truth that sets us free. With right concentration, the training in mental discipline, or samadhi, is now complete. We have journeyed through the entire practical methodology of the path. We began with the training in sila, creating a life of outer integrity through our speech, actions, and livelihood. This provided the stable ground. Then, we undertook the training in samadhi, developing a mind that is powerful, clear, and unified through the practices of right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. We have now built the foundation, and we have forged a perfect instrument. The mind is now prepared. It is calm, it is strong, it is sharp. It is ready to be used for its highest purpose, to see reality, not as we wish it were, not as we fear it might be, not as we have been conditioned to see it, but just as it is. With this powerful tool in hand, we can now turn our attention to the great wisdom teachings of the path, beginning our direct investigation into the fundamental nature of existence, starting with the most immediate and universal truth of all, the truth of impermanence. With a mind now grounded in the integrity of ethical conduct and honed to a razor's edge by the practice of concentration, we are prepared to turn our gaze toward the ultimate nature of reality. We now begin the training in wisdom, or panna, not by accepting a belief, but by undertaking a direct investigation. The first and most fundamental truth we encounter when we look at the world with this clear, steady mind is the profound and universal characteristic of anicca, or impermanence. On the surface, this truth can feel deeply unsettling. From the moment we are born, we instinctively seek stability, security, and permanence. We build solid houses, we form relationships we hope will last forever, and we cling to a sense of self we believe to be constant and unchanging. The declaration that everything is in a state of constant flux, that nothing is permanent, can feel like the ground is being pulled out from under our feet. It can seem like a philosophy of despair, but the wisdom of the path reveals the opposite. The truth of impermanence is not a curse. It is the very key that unlocks the door to our freedom. The suffering we experience comes not from the fact of change itself, but from our futile and exhausting resistance to it. The spiritual path is not an attempt to dam the great river of existence, but a practice of learning to navigate its currents with wisdom, grace, and an open heart. To truly grasp the scale of impermanence, let us first cast our gaze outward to the largest canvas imaginable, the cosmos itself. The stars that glitter in the night sky, which seem to us like symbols of eternity, are themselves ephemeral phenomena. We now know that they are born in the fiery collapse of vast cosmic clouds. They burn for millions or billions of years in a delicate balance of gravity and fusion, and they die in spectacular explosions called supernovae, scattering the very elements that make up our bodies: the carbon, the oxygen, the iron across the galaxy, to seed the formation of new stars, new planets, and new life. The seemingly solid Earth beneath our feet is a dynamic and violent place. Continents drift, collide, and tear themselves apart. Great mountain ranges are thrust upwards over eons, only to be relentlessly ground down into grains of sand by the patient, persistent forces of wind and water. The history of our own species is a story written in the ink of impermanence. We walk among the ruins of civilizations that once believed themselves to be eternal. The Roman Forum, the pyramids of Egypt, the temples of Angkor Watis, were the centers of immense power. Yet today, they are monuments not to permanence, but to the inescapable law of change. Their languages are dead, their gods are forgotten, their empires are dust. To see impermanence on this grand scale is to begin to depersonalize our own experience of it. Change is not something that is happening to us. It is the fundamental operating principle of everything. Now, let us bring our focus closer to home, to the intimate scale of a single human life. Look at your own body. Is it the same body you had 7 years ago? Science tells us that nearly every cell has been replaced. Is it the same body you had as a child, as a toddler, as a newborn? The body is not a static object. It is a continuous process, a verb, not a noun. It is a constant, dynamic exchange of energy and matter with the world around it, breathing, eating, drinking, eliminating. It is a process that unfolds through predictable stages of growth, maturity, decay, and eventual dissolution. We try so hard to freeze it at a particular stage, to fight the signs of aging, to preserve a youthful image, but this is a battle we can never win. To understand Anika is to learn to inhabit this changing body with gratitude and care rather than with fear and attachment. The same is true of our relationships. A friendship begins, it deepens, it evolves. Sometimes it fades, and sometimes it ends. A passionate romance may transform into a quiet, deep companionship. Our children, whom we hold in our arms as infants, grow into independent adults with lives of their own. We often suffer in relationships because we are clinging to a memory of what the relationship was, rather than engaging with the reality of what it is in this moment. To embrace impermanence in our relationships is to love people as they are now, appreciating the gift of their presence without demanding that they never change. Our worldly possessions, our wealth, our status, these are perhaps the most obviously unstable of all phenomena. Money is earned and lost. Houses decay. Cars break down. Reputations can be destroyed in an instant. To build our identity and our security on these shifting sands is to guarantee ourselves a life of anxiety. There is a poignant ancient story that illustrates this truth with heartbreaking clarity. A young woman named Kisa Gotami had a beloved infant son who fell ill and died. Consumed by a grief so powerful it bordered on madness, she refused to accept his death. Clutching his small body, she went from house to house, begging everyone she met for a medicine that could bring him back to life. Some mocked her, others pitied her, but no one could help. Finally, a wise man, seeing her desperation, told her to go to the Buddha. She went and pleaded with the Buddha to perform a miracle. The Buddha looked at her with immense compassion and said he could help her, but on one condition: she must bring him back a single mustard seed from a house where no one had ever died. Filled with a desperate hope, Kisa Gotami began her search. She went to the first house and asked, "Have you a mustard seed for me? The Buddha will use it to bring my son back to life." "Of course," the woman there said. "But has anyone in this house ever died?" The woman's face fell. "Oh yes," she said. "My husband died just last year." Kisa Gotami went to the next house, and the next, and the next, throughout the entire village. In every single house, she heard the same story. "We have plenty of mustard seeds, but our father died here. My sister died here. Our first child died here." The living were few, she realized, but the dead were many. As evening fell, she sat alone in a charnel ground outside the village, watching the flickering oil lamps that the villagers had lit. She watched as they flared up brightly, and then, one by one, as their fuel was spent, they sputtered and went out. In that moment, watching the impermanence of the flames, her personal grief dissolved into a universal wisdom. "How selfish I have been in my sorrow," she thought. She finally understood that death is not a personal tragedy that happened only to her, but an inescapable part of life itself. In that profound acceptance of Anika, she was finally able to let go of her son's body and find the path to her own peace. This understanding of impermanence is not just a philosophical concept. It is something we can experience directly, moment by moment, through the practice of mindfulness. With a mind that has been calmed and focused, we can turn our attention inward and witness the ceaseless dance of existence. We can practice mindfulness of feelings. Vedana, a pleasant feeling arises the warmth of a cup of tea in your hands. If you watch it closely, you will see it is not a solid block of pleasantness. It has a beginning. It shimmers with sensation. It subtly changes, and it eventually fades away. An unpleasant feeling arises a pang of anxiety, a dull ache. Our instinct is to resist it. But if we simply observe it with curious attention, we discover that it too is not solid. It morphs, it pulses, it intensifies and subsides, and eventually, it too dissolves. We learn from direct experience that no feeling is final. We can then turn our attention to the stream of thought itself. We sit and watch as thoughts appear in the mind, seemingly from nowhere. A memory, a plan, a judgment, a line from a song. Each one has a brief life, and then it is gone, replaced by the next. We see that we are not the author of our thoughts. We are the witness. This first-hand observation of the ephemeral, gossamer nature of our own inner world is profoundly liberating. The world we perceive as so solid and real begins to reveal its true nature. It is a vibrant, shimmering, ceaseless process of arising and passing away. What then is the great wisdom of impermanence? How does this deep seeing change the way we live our lives? First, it cultivates a profound appreciation for the present moment. When you know in your bones that this moment will never come again, you learn to inhabit it fully. You taste your food more completely. You listen to your friends more deeply. You see the beauty in ordinary things more clearly. You stop postponing your life, waiting for some future moment of perfection, and you begin to live in the rich and vivid reality of the here and now. Second, the wisdom of impermanence is the wisdom of letting go. We learn to release our grip. We let go of old grudges and resentments because we see that both we and the person who harmed us are constantly changing. We let go of regrets because the past is an ephemeral memory that no longer exists. We let go of our anxieties about the future because we understand that the future is an unknowable, unfolding process. This letting go is not a passive resignation. It is an active and joyful release of an unnecessary burden. Finally, a mind that truly understands Anika becomes flexible, resilient, and fearless. It is like a deeply rooted willow tree that can bend with the strongest winds without breaking. It no longer shatters when faced with loss or disappointment because it understands that change is the very texture of life. It learns to dance with the flow, to find stability not in resisting change, but in gracefully adapting to it. The truth of impermanence is not a grim verdict on the meaninglessness of life. It is a powerful and compassionate invitation to awaken. It shows us the utter futility of our clinging, our desperate attempts to find a permanent foothold in a flowing river. It calls us to stop fighting the current and instead to find our peace and freedom in the dynamic, vibrant, and ever-changing dance of existence. And as we investigate this truth more and more deeply, as we see every aspect of our experience arising and passing away, a critical and startling question begins to emerge. If my body is always changing, if my feelings are always changing, if my thoughts are always changing, then who or what is the unchanging I that is experiencing all of this? If every component part of what I call myself is in a state of constant flux, where is the permanent, solid self to be found? This powerful inquiry, born from the deep seeing of impermanence, leads us directly to the next great mark of existence, the most profound and challenging teaching of all, the truth of anatta, or not self. Having journeyed into the universal truth of impermanence, seeing how everything from the stars in the sky to our own thoughts are in a state of constant flux, we arrive at the most profound and challenging question on the spiritual path. If my body is always changing, if my feelings are a fleeting parade, if my thoughts arise and vanish like bubbles in a stream, then who or what is the one experiencing all of this? Where is the permanent, unchanging I at the center of this whirlwind of change? We have a deep, instinctual feeling of being a self, a coherent identity that persists through time. But the Buddha with his characteristic precision and courage, asks us to investigate this feeling, not just to assume it. The result of this investigation is the second great mark of existence, the truth of anatta, often translated as not self or no self. This is, without question, the most radical, the most counterintuitive, and ultimately the most liberating of all the teachings. It is crucial to state at the outset what anatta is not. It is not a nihilistic declaration that we do not exist, or that life is meaningless. It is a precise and practical insight into how we exist, not as a static noun, but as a dynamic verb, not as a fixed thing, but as a fluid process. To make this profound concept accessible, we can turn to a famous dialogue that took place between a Buddhist sage named Nagasena and a Greek king, Melinda, who ruled a kingdom in ancient India. The king, a sharp and inquisitive man, was puzzled by the Buddhist teachings on the self. He approached Nagasena and asked his name. The sage replied that he was known as Nagasena, but that this was merely a conventional designation, a name in common use, for there was no permanent person or soul to be found. The king was astounded and delighted, seeing a chance for a philosophical debate. He challenged Nagasena, using the king's own chariot as an example. "Reverend sir," the king began, "if there is no permanent person, then who is it that wears these robes and takes this food? Look at this chariot I arrived in. Is the chariot the pole that pulls it?" "No, your majesty," Nagasena replied. "Is it the axle? Number. Is it the wheels, the frame, the reins, or the whip?" The king answered no to each question. Nagasena then asked, "Is the chariot then all of these parts combined?" "No, reverend sir." "Is it something separate and outside of these parts?" "Number," Nagasena then declared. "Then, your majesty, for all your questions, I can find no chariot. Chariot is but a sound, a mere name." The king, cornered by this impeccable logic, had a flash of insight. He conceded that we use the word chariot as a convenient designation for the assembly of these parts. When the wheels, axle, pole, and frame are brought together in a particular functional relationship, we call the resulting assembly a chariot. It has a conventional reality, but it has no ultimate independent existence apart from its components. Nagasena then delivered the final, brilliant point. "Just so, your majesty, with me. Nagasena is a conventional term for the collection of my hair, my skin, my feelings, my thoughts, my consciousness, but in an ultimate sense, there is no permanent person to be found." This method of deconstruction is precisely the one the Buddha himself taught for investigating the self. He encouraged us not to speculate about a soul, but to look directly at our own experience and break it down into its constituent parts. He described our entire psychophysical being as a collection of 5 interconnected processes known as the 5 aggregates, or skandhas. The first is the aggregate of form, or rupa. This is the material aspect of our being, our body with its flesh, bones, and blood, and the entire physical world as it is perceived by our senses. As we saw in our exploration of impermanence, this body is in a state of constant flux. It is not the same from one day to the next. It is a process of arising and passing away. So, we must ask, is this changing, decaying body my true, permanent self? The clear answer is no. The second is the aggregate of feelings, or vedana. This is the constant stream of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral sensations that arise whenever our senses make contact with the world. As we have seen, these feeling tones are incredibly fleeting, lasting only for a moment before being replaced by the next. They are utterly unreliable. So, we must ask, are these flickering, transient feelings my true, permanent self? Again, the answer is no. The third is the aggregate of perception, or sana. This is the faculty of the mind that recognizes, identifies, and labels our experience. It is the process that says, blue sky, loud sound, dog, chair. This faculty is entirely dependent on what we have learned and the conditions of the moment. It is not a stable entity. So, is this labeling, recognizing process my true, permanent self? The answer must be no. The fourth is the aggregate of mental formations. or sankhara. This is a broad and vital category that includes all of our volitional activities, our habits, our biases, our opinions, our prejudices, our desires, our aversions, all the churning, active, intentional contents of our mind. This is what we most closely identify with as our personality. But when we look closely, we see that our opinions change, our desires shift, and our moods are constantly in motion. These are conditioned patterns, not a solid, unchanging essence. So, are these dynamic mental habits and thoughts my true, permanent self? The answer, once again, is no. Finally, we come to the fifth aggregate, consciousness or vijnana. This is the raw faculty of awareness itself, the basic knowing of an object. But consciousness, when investigated, is not found to be a singular, continuous entity that exists on its own. It is always dependent on an object and a sense organ. There is seeing consciousness, which arises when the eye meets a form. There is hearing consciousness, which arises when the ear meets a sound. There is thinking consciousness, which arises when the mind meets a thought. Each moment of consciousness arises with its object and passes away with its object. Is this flickering, dependent awareness my true, permanent self? The answer must be no. After this exhaustive analysis, after taking apart the chariot of our being piece by piece, we are left with a startling conclusion. We have examined every single component of our lived experience, our body, our feelings, our perceptions, our thoughts, and our awareness, and we have not found a self in any of them. We have not found a driver in the chariot, an owner of the house, a CEO in the corporation. The self is not a thing, but a temporary event. It is a conventional name for the dynamic, interdependent process of these five aggregates working together. Why is seeing this truth so profoundly liberating? Because the illusion of a solid, separate self is the root cause of the vast majority of our suffering. The belief in a me is a magnet for trouble. It is this me that feels insulted and must defend its honor. It is this me that feels pride and clings to its achievements. It is this me that is consumed with worry about its future and fear of its own annihilation. The Self Project is a lifelong, exhausting effort of promoting, protecting, and perfecting a fiction. When, through direct insight, we begin to see through this illusion, the whole structure of our suffering begins to crumble. We take things less personally. The criticism of another is no longer a dagger aimed at our core, but simply information passing through awareness. The need to be right all the time diminishes. Our fear of death lessens because we understand there is no solid entity to be destroyed, only a process that will continue to change its form. Furthermore, the illusion of a separate self is what creates the painful sense of alienation from the world. It creates the division between me and other. When this artificial boundary begins to dissolve, a natural and effortless compassion arises. We no longer see a world of separate beings, but a single interconnected web of life, a vast dance of causes and conditions. Harming another becomes, in a very real sense, harming ourselves. Anatta, then, is the ultimate shift in identity. We learn to stop identifying as a static noun and begin to experience ourselves as a flowing verb. We are not a being, but a constant becoming. We are not a thing, but a process. This insight does not lead to a cold, detached nihilism. It leads to a warm, engaged, and fearless participation in the great mysterious flow of life. This profound wisdom, combined with the understanding of impermanence, utterly transforms our view of the world and our place in it. And this transformation inevitably leads us to question our relationship with the seemingly solid material world we invest so much energy in. If everything is changing and there is no permanent self to possess anything, then what is the meaning of our frantic pursuit of wealth and possessions? This inquiry takes us directly to the next stage of our investigation, a re-examination of our relationship with materialism. With a mind that has begun to glimpse the profound truths of impermanence and not self, our relationship with the world begins to fundamentally shift. We can no longer look at our lives, our goals, and our desires in the same way. This new, clearer vision now turns to one of the most powerful and pervasive forces in modern life, the relentless pursuit of material wealth and possessions. Our culture is built upon the promise that happiness can be bought, that security can be owned, and that a meaningful life is one that is filled with things. But the wisdom of the path invites us to look deeply at this promise, to investigate whether this gilded cage of materialism truly delivers on its claims, or whether it is, in fact, a hidden source of our deepest anxieties and dissatisfactions. It is vital to understand that the Buddhist path does not condemn wealth or comfort. The Buddha recognized that a certain level of material security is conducive to a life of practice, and that poverty can be a great source of suffering. The problem is not money or possessions themselves. The problem is our deep-seated attachment to them and the profound, deluded belief that they are the source of lasting happiness. We live inside an architecture of manufactured dissatisfaction. Our modern economy, in many ways, is a vast and sophisticated engine designed to create and sustain tanha, the thirst of craving. The entire industry of advertising is predicated on a single function: to make you feel that you are incomplete, that something is missing from your life, and then to present a product or service as the magical solution to that manufactured lack. It creates an itch and then sells you the temporary relief of scratching it. Social media amplifies this process exponentially. Our screens become a constant stream of curated perfection, showcasing the luxurious vacations, the designer clothes, the perfect homes, and the beautiful possessions of others. We are drawn into a silent, ceaseless competition of comparison, a game in which we are almost always left feeling that our own life is somehow deficient. This system traps us on what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill. We work incredibly hard to achieve a certain level of wealth or to acquire a desired object. When we finally get it, there is a brief spike of pleasure, a fleeting sense of satisfaction. But because of anicca, impermanence, that feeling inevitably fades. The new car becomes just a car. The thrill of the promotion wears off. And so, the treadmill dictates that we must now strive for the next bigger, better thing to get another hit of happiness. It is a cycle of wanting, getting, and wanting more, a perfect formula for perpetual dukkha, a race that has no finish line. Let us imagine a modern parable. Consider a man named Mark, who has, by all external measures, succeeded at this game. He lives in a large, architecturally stunning house, filled with expensive art, the latest technology, and immaculate furniture. He has the car, the watch, and the wardrobe that our culture tells him are the symbols of a life well lived. But is his mind at peace? He finds himself constantly worried. He worries about the stock market, which could diminish his wealth. He worries about his sophisticated security system and the possibility of theft. He worries about his beautiful things getting scratched, becoming outdated, or losing their value. His possessions, which were supposed to bring him freedom and happiness, have instead become a source of profound, low-grade anxiety. He has become the custodian of his own gilded cage, constantly polishing its bars. His mind is not free, it is owned by the things he owns. Now consider another person, a woman named Claire. She lives a much simpler life in a small, modest apartment. She has few possessions, but each one is something she genuinely uses or loves. Because her life is not oriented around the endless cycle of earning and acquiring, she possesses a different, more profound kind of wealth. She has an abundance of time. She has the freedom to spend a long afternoon simply walking in a park with no agenda other than to feel the sun on her skin and hear the sound of the wind in the trees. Her mind is not cluttered with financial anxieties or a mental shopping list of things she craves. She is free. She has a lightness of being. This story asks us to question our very definition of wealth. Is true wealth the accumulation of things, or is it the liberation from the need to accumulate them? The path offers a different definition of wealth, a treasure that is internal, stable, and cannot be diminished by market fluctuations. This true wealth is called santuti, or contentment. Contentment is not a passive resignation or a lazy acceptance of one's lot in life. It is an active, wise, and deeply peaceful state of mind. It is the ability to appreciate what we have right now without the constant, nagging feeling that something is missing. It is a radical disengagement from the cultural hypnosis that relentlessly screams more. Contentment is a skill that we can cultivate. It grows naturally from the practice of gratitude, from consciously taking the time to notice and appreciate the simple, good things that are already present in our lives. A healthy body, a supportive friendship, a nourishing meal, a moment of quiet. It is strengthened by the wisdom of impermanence and not self. When we truly see that everything is transient, our desperate need to accumulate things lessens. When we truly see that there is no solid self to aggrandize, our need to define ourselves by our possessions falls away. Contentment is the quiet, powerful realization that we are already whole. It is the deep, abiding peace of knowing what is enough. If the poison of materialism is our grasping and clinging, then the direct antidote is the practice of generosity, or dana. In the Buddhist tradition, dana is the first and most fundamental of all spiritual virtues. It is far more than just a social good or an act of charity. It is a profound practice for purifying the heart and liberating the mind. Every single act of giving, no matter how small, is an act of letting go. It is a direct counter-movement to the ego's instinct to hoard, protect, and identify with me and mine. When we give freely, without expecting anything in return, whether we are giving our money, our time, our expertise, or simply our full, undivided attention to another person, we are actively weakening the chains of attachment. Each act of generosity dissolves the rigid boundary between self and other, fostering a sense of interconnectedness and warmth. It helps us to shift our entire orientation from a mindset of scarcity, which is the constant fear of not having enough, to a mindset of abundance, which is the confident, joyful recognition that we have enough to share. Giving is the joyful celebration of our own contentment. Ultimately, the wisdom of the path invites us to redefine the good life. It shows us the gilded cage of materialism for what it is, a beautiful prison that promises happiness but often delivers only anxiety. It empowers us to find the key, to unlock the door, and to walk out into the fresh air of a life defined not by the abundance of our possessions, but by the quality of our presence, the depth of our inner peace, and the boundless generosity of our hearts. As we reorient our relationship with the material world, we are naturally led to examine our relationships with each other. If lasting happiness is not to be found in things, then surely it must be found in love and connection. But how do we navigate the complex world of human relationships without falling into the same traps of clinging, possession, and attachment? How do we learn to love freely, wisely, and with a heart that is both open and strong? This inquiry leads us away from the world of objects and into the sublime realm of the heart, to the practice of compassion and loving kindness. Having reoriented our relationship with the material world, moving from the gilded cage of materialism to the inner wealth of contentment, we now turn to the most vital and nourishing landscape of all, the landscape of the heart. If happiness is not found in things, we instinctively feel it must be found in love, in our connection with other beings. Yet so often, our relationships become another source of dukkha. Our love becomes tainted with the very same poisons of clinging, possession, and fear that plague our relationship with the material world. We love someone because of how they make us feel. We need them. We fear losing them. This is not the love that liberates. It is the love that binds. The Buddha, understanding this with perfect clarity, offered a sublime and systematic training for the heart. This is the practice of the Brahma Viharas, a term that translates as the divine abodhis or the four immeasurables. They are called immeasurable because, when fully developed, they extend boundlessly in all directions to all beings without limit or exception. They are the four faces of perfect, purified love, a love that is a source of boundless joy and freedom, not suffering and attachment. The first of these divine abodes, the very foundation of this heart training, is loving kindness, or metta. Metta is the sincere, unconditional, and heartfelt wish for the genuine happiness and well-being of all living beings. It is not the passionate, grasping desire of romantic love, nor is it the conditional affection we might feel for only our inner circle. It is a gentle, steady, and radiant warmth, a universal friendliness that wishes well for all, simply because they exist and, like us, wish to be happy. The practice of cultivating metta is a radical act of reorienting the heart away from its habitual patterns of judgment, criticism, and indifference, and toward a baseline of warmth and goodwill. Crucially, this practice must begin with ourselves. In our modern culture, so many of us are plagued by a harsh inner critic, by feelings of inadequacy, and by a deep-seated belief that we are somehow not good enough. We cannot offer water to others from a dry and empty well. Therefore, the first step in cultivating metta is the brave and often difficult act of turning that warmth inward. We find a quiet moment and we offer ourselves the very wishes we would offer to a beloved friend. We might silently repeat phrases such as, "May I be safe. May I be healthy in body and mind. May I be happy and content. May I live my life with ease." At first, this may feel artificial or even impossible. The inner critic may scream in protest. But with gentle persistence, these seeds of kindness begin to take root in the barren soil of our self-judgment. We are learning, for the first time, to be a true friend to ourselves. Once we have established a baseline of self-compassion, we begin to expand the circle of loving kindness outward. We first bring to mind a benefactor or a respected teacher, someone for whom we feel natural gratitude and warmth. Holding their image in our mind, we extend the same wishes. May you be happy, may you be well, may you be safe. We let our heart connect with this easy, flowing love. Next, we extend the feeling to our dear friends and family members, bathing them in this unconditional goodwill. Then comes a crucial step in stretching the muscle of the heart. We bring to mind a neutral person, someone we see often but have no strong feelings about, like a cashier in a store, or a person who lives down the street. We offer them the very same heartfelt wishes. In this moment, we are actively breaking down the walls of indifference that separate us from most of humanity, recognizing their wish to be happy is just as strong as our own. Finally, we undertake the most transformative part of the practice. We bring to mind a difficult person, someone with whom we have conflict or for whom we feel resentment. This is not an exercise in condoning their harmful actions or forcing a superficial forgiveness. It is a pragmatic act of self-liberation. We recognize that our hatred for this person is a poison that we are drinking, a hot coal that we are holding. For the sake of our own peace, we practice offering them the same wishes for happiness. This act begins to dissolve the prison of our own resentment. From here, the practice becomes boundless as we radiate metta in all directions to all humans, all animals, all beings, in all realms, seen and unseen, near and far, until our heart becomes a sun, shining its warmth equally upon all of life. The second divine abode is compassion, or karuna. If metta is the heart's response to the wish for happiness, karuna is the heart's response to the reality of suffering. It is the trembling of the heart, the quivering of the spirit, in the face of pain, both our own and others. But it is not just a feeling, it is coupled with the powerful, active wish. May you be free from this suffering. It is essential to distinguish true compassion from its near enemies. It is not pity, which looks down on another from a position of superiority and creates distance. Nor is it mere empathic distress, which is to be so overwhelmed by another's pain that we become paralyzed and have to turn away. True compassion is strong and resilient. It has the courage to be present with suffering, to bear witness to pain without being consumed by it. It is the quality that allows a doctor to perform a difficult surgery or a parent to care for a sick child. It is love in action. The ultimate embodiment of karuna is found in a story from the Buddha's own life. He once came upon a monastery where a monk was gravely ill with a foul, contagious disease. He was lying in his own filth, and all the other monks, out of fear and disgust, had abandoned him completely. The Buddha, the teacher of kings and gods, without a moment of hesitation, went to the sick monk. He gently boiled water and, with his own hands, began to wash the monk's soiled robes and his sickly body. His beloved disciple, Ananda, helped him. They cleaned the monk, changed his bedding, and offered him comfort and solace. The Buddha then gathered all the other monks and delivered a powerful teaching. He told them, "You have no mother or father here to care for you. If you do not care for one another, who will? Whoever would tend to me should tend to the sick." This is karuna in its most perfect expression, fearless, unconditional, and moved to direct, practical action. We cultivate it by learning to turn towards suffering rather than away from it. We start by offering compassion to our own pain, meeting our own difficulties with kindness rather than judgment. Then, we extend this wish outwards, holding the suffering of others in our heart and sincerely wishing for their release. The third divine abode is sympathetic joy, or mudita. If karuna is feeling the sorrow of others, mudita is feeling their joy. It is the practice of cultivating genuine, unselfish happiness in the good fortune, success, and happiness of other people. For the untrained mind, this can be the most difficult of the four qualities to cultivate. In our competitive society, our default reaction to hearing of another's success is often a pang of envy. We feel that their success somehow highlights our own failures, that their happiness diminishes our own. We believe, unconsciously, that there is a limited supply of joy in the world. Mudita is the radical antidote to this poison of envy and comparison. It is the wisdom to understand that joy is not a zero-sum game. Another person's happiness takes nothing away from you. In fact, by learning to rejoice in their joy, you multiply your own opportunities for happiness 1,000-fold. You are no longer limited to the scarce moments of your own personal success. You can now feel joy when a friend gets the job they wanted, when a colleague receives praise, when a stranger on the street is laughing with delight, even when a rival succeeds. It is a profound expansion of the heart. We cultivate mudita by consciously looking for the good in the world and celebrating it. We can bring to mind the good fortune of a friend and silently repeat, "I am so happy for you. May your joy and good fortune continue." It is a powerful practice that transforms the bitter poison of envy into the sweet nectar of shared delight. The fourth and final divine abode is equanimity, or upekkha. This is the crown jewel of the four, the quality that holds and balances all the others. Upekkha is a state of profound balance, stability, impartiality, and peace. It is the spacious, unshakable heart that can hold all of life's experiences, the joy and the sorrow, the praise and the blame, the success and the failure, without being thrown off balance. It is born of a deep wisdom, an understanding of the laws of impermanence and karma. Equanimity sees that all beings are the heirs of their own actions, and while we can offer our help and our love, we cannot control the outcomes of their lives. We love, we care, we act with compassion, but we release our anxious attachment to the results. It is vital not to confuse equanimity with its near enemy, which is cold indifference or apathy. Upekkha is not a disconnected state. It is a love that is so vast and all, encompassing that it holds everyone in the same warm embrace without clinging or preference. It is the quality that prevents our loving kindness from becoming possessive attachment, our compassion from turning into burnout, and our joy from becoming manic excitement. It is the steady, clear-eyed wisdom that allows our love to be truly boundless and liberating. Together, these four immeasurables form a complete education of the human heart. They are the way we learn to love without clinging, to care without despair, to rejoice without envy, and to remain steadfast and peaceful in the face of a constantly changing world. They teach us how to form connections that are a source of profound freedom and happiness rather than another form of bondage. As we cultivate this radiant, open, and resilient heart, we create a powerful inner refuge. But this refuge must still contend with the raw and primal energies that arise within our own minds. How does this sublime love equip us to deal with the sudden fire of our own anger or the icy grip of our own fear? This question leads us to our next investigation, a practical exploration of how to work skillfully with our most difficult emotions. Even with the heart cultivated in the boundless qualities of loving kindness and compassion, we will still encounter storms. Our inner landscape, like the sky, is not always clear and sunny. There will be times when the fierce winds of anger arise, or when the cold fog of fear descends upon us. These powerful, primal emotions are a fundamental part of our human inheritance. Our conventional way of dealing with them is often unskilled and creates more suffering. On the one hand, we might believe in cathartic expression acting out our anger by yelling, slamming doors, or firing off a furious email. This approach almost always causes harm, poisoning our relationships and escalating conflict. On the other hand, we might try to repress these emotions, swallowing our anger, pretending we are not afraid, and pushing these powerful energies down into the dark basement of our psyche. This approach also causes harm, leading to anxiety, depression, and a sense of being at war with ourselves. The path of wisdom offers a middle way, a third option that is neither unrestrained expression nor forceful repression. It is the path of mindful transformation. It teaches us to treat these difficult emotions not as enemies to be destroyed, but as powerful messengers to be welcomed, listened to, and cared for with compassion and skill. The very first step, when the fire of anger or the ice of fear arises, is to apply the tool of right mindfulness. Before we get swept away by the narrative of who wronged us or what terrible thing might happen, we must first turn our attention directly to the raw, physical experience of the emotion itself. We drop the storyline and we investigate the sensations. What does this anger actually feel like in my body? Perhaps it is a searing heat in the chest, a tightness in the jaw, a surge of energy in the arms, a knot in the stomach. We simply notice these physical sensations with a cool, curious, and non-judgmental awareness. We are not the anger, we are the awareness that is noticing the sensations of anger. This simple shift in perspective is profoundly powerful. It immediately creates a space between our sense of self and the raw energy of the emotion. We are no longer possessed by it, we are observing it. We do the same with fear. What are its physical signatures? A cold feeling in the hands, a racing heart, a shallow breath, a feeling of constriction in the throat. We just watch. As we observe these sensations, we notice their impermanent nature. They are not solid, monolithic blocks of feeling. They pulse, they shift, they change in intensity. The heat in the chest crests like a wave, and then it begins to subside. The knot in the stomach tightens, and then it softens. By simply watching without feeding the emotion with more angry or fearful thoughts, we allow its natural, energetic life cycle to complete itself. We see that it is a temporary weather pattern, not a permanent part of our climate. To guide us in this gentle practice, the great Zen master, Thich Nhat Hanh, offered a beautiful and compassionate analogy. He taught us to care for our anger as we would care for a crying baby. When a baby begins to cry, a good parent does not ignore it or yell at it to be quiet. A good parent immediately stops what they are doing, goes to the baby, and picks it up gently. This first act of picking up the baby is the practice of mindfulness. We hear the cry of our anger and we stop. We turn our attention inward and acknowledge its presence. Hello, my anger. I see that you are there. I will take care of you. The second act is to hold the baby with tenderness and care. This is the practice of generating metta, or loving kindness, for our own emotion. We embrace our anger with compassion. We don't judge ourselves for feeling it. We know it is a form of suffering, and we hold that suffering with a kind and accepting heart. The third act is to look deeply to understand why the baby is crying. Is it hungry? Is it wet? Is it scared? This is the practice of insight. We look deeply into the nature of our anger to understand its roots. This loving, mindful attention is what ultimately soothes the baby. In the same way, it is what soothes and transforms our anger. This practice of looking deeply reveals a profound truth. Strong emotions are messengers, and they almost always carry information about a deeper, more vulnerable state. Anger, in particular, is very often a secondary emotion, a protective shield that we unconsciously raise to cover up a feeling of being hurt or afraid. Think of a time you felt a flash of intense anger. If you look underneath that fiery surface, you will almost always find a tender spot of pain. Perhaps someone's comment made you angry because it touched on a deep insecurity you have about your intelligence or your worth. The anger is the guard dog that barks furiously to protect that vulnerable, wounded part of you. Fear is a messenger whose message is more direct. It tells us that we perceive a threat, that something we value, safety, our reputation, our loved one, is at risk. By listening to the fear with mindful attention, instead of either panicking or ignoring it, we can assess the message clearly. Is this a real and present danger that requires skillful action? Or is this a paper tiger, a fear generated by our own catastrophic thinking about the future? Looking deeply allows us to distinguish between wise caution and neurotic anxiety. When we learn to listen to the message beneath the noise, we can start to care for the actual wound, not just react to the superficial symptom. After we have mindfully held the emotion and listened to its message, we can apply the ultimate medicine. We can consciously use the beautiful qualities of the heart we have been cultivating. First, as strange as it may sound, we offer loving kindness directly to the anger or the fear itself. We can say to ourselves, I embrace my anger with compassion. I allow my fear to be held in a space of kindness. This act feels revolutionary because it completely stops the war against ourselves. It ends the cycle of feeling a difficult emotion and then adding a second arrow of self-judgment for feeling it. We accept our full humanity. Second, as the intensity of the emotion subsides, we can begin to extend that same loving kindness outward toward the person or situation that triggered our response. This is the practice of using water to extinguish a fire, not more fire. Responding to anger with more anger only creates a bigger blaze, but responding with even a small seed of understanding or goodwill begins to break the cycle of reactivity. It is the ultimate act of reclaiming our own power and our own peace, refusing to allow the state of our mind to be dictated by external circumstances. By approaching our difficult emotions in this way with mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom, we transform them from tyrannical enemies into workable energies and even into allies on our path of awakening. We learn that we are not our anger. We are not our fear. We are the spacious, compassionate awareness that can hold both anger and fear without being diminished by them. We discover that our heart is far bigger than we ever imagined, with the capacity to contain all of life's storms and still remain fundamentally peaceful and free. This deep, intimate work with our own inner world, learning to navigate the currents of our own mind, naturally opens up a new field of inquiry. We begin to see how our inner states and the outer world are not so separate. We see how our mind conditions our experience of the world and how the world conditions our mind. This leads us to question the very nature of that separation, guiding us toward one of the most sublime and unifying insights of the path, the truth of interdependence. Having learned to work with the powerful currents of our inner world, our investigation now expands, moving from the personal to the universal. The deep insights of impermanence and not self have dismantled our old, comfortable notions of a solid and separate reality. We have seen that we are not a fixed entity, but a flowing process. This begs the question, if we are not a separate self, then what is our relationship to everything else? How do we exist in this world? The answer to this question is one of the most beautiful, profound, and unifying teachings on the path. It is the doctrine of interdependence, or dependent origination, known in Pali as pratitya samutpada. This is the positive expression of the truth of not self. While anatta showed us what we are, nota, separate, permanent soul interdependence, shows us what we are, a seamless, interconnected, and miraculous manifestation of the entire universe. The principle of dependent origination can be expressed in a simple, elegant formula. When this is, that is. From the arising of this, that arises. When this is not, that is not. From the cessation of this, that ceases. This means that nothing, absolutely nothing, exists in isolation. Everything in existence arises in dependence upon other causes and conditions. Nothing has an independent, self-contained being. To understand this, let us consider something as simple and as beautiful as a flower in a field. At first glance, the flower appears to be a separate thing, but when we look with the eyes of interdependence, we see that this is an illusion. The flower cannot exist by itself. Its existence is entirely dependent on a vast network of what we might call non-flower elements. The sun is in the flower, providing the light for photosynthesis. The clouds are in the flower, having provided the life-giving rain. The soil is in the flower, offering its minerals and nutrients. The bee that pollinated its parent plant is in the flower, as is the gardener who may have planted the seed. If we were to take away the sun, the rain, the soil, the air, and the bee, there would be no flower left. The flower, in its essence, is made entirely of non-flower elements. It is a temporary, beautiful gathering point for the entire cosmos. Now, let us turn this same insight upon ourselves. We have a powerful, instinctual feeling of being an independent I. But when we look closely, we see that this I is just as interdependent as the flower. Our existence is entirely conditional. It depends on our parents who gave us our genetic material. It depends on the countless generations of ancestors who came before them. Our existence at this very moment depends on the air we are breathing, the food we ate for breakfast, and the farmers who grew that food. The language we think in, the concepts we use, the culture that has shaped our values, we did not invent these things. We have inherited them. Even our consciousness is dependent. It always arises in relation to an objecta, sight, a sound, a thought. We are not a noun, we are a nexus. We are a meeting point, a process, a conversation that the entire universe is having with itself. To truly see this is to be cured of the sickness of alienation. The feeling of being a lonely, separate self, struggling against the world, begins to dissolve in the face of this profound, unifying truth. In the rich imagery of Mahayana Buddhism, this vision of reality is captured in the beautiful metaphor of Indra's net. Imagine a vast, cosmic net that stretches out infinitely in all directions. At every single node where the threads of the net cross, there hangs a single, perfect, multifaceted crystal jewel. The magical nature of this net is this. If you look deeply into the polished surface of any one jewel, you will see reflected within it every other jewel in the entire infinite net. And if you look at any of the reflections within that single jewel, you will see that they too contain the reflection of all the other jewels, and so on, for infinity. Each jewel, each being, each event in the universe simultaneously reflects and is reflected by every other. The entire universe is present in every single part. To touch one jewel is to make the whole net shimmer and vibrate. This is the vision of interdependence. It is a vision of radical wholeness, where there is no separation, only relationship. This understanding of interdependence leads us directly to the profound concept of emptiness, or shunyata. When this word is heard, it is often mistaken for a nihilistic concept of nothingness or non-existence. But this is a complete misunderstanding. Emptiness is not a void. It is a vision of reality brimming with potential. Emptiness means that all phenomena are empty of a separate, independent, intrinsic self-nature. Because everything is radically interconnected and dependent on other factors for its existence, nothing has its own, private, self-contained being. The flower is empty of a separate flowerness because it is full of the sun, the rain, and the soil. If it had its own intrinsic, independent nature, it would not need these other elements. In the same way, we are empty of a separate self-nature because we are full of the universe. We are full of our ancestors, our food, our education, and the very air we breathe. This emptiness is not a lack. It is the very proof of our intimate connection with all of life. This insight has the power to completely reframe our experience of life. The feeling of meaninglessness that so often haunts the modern mind comes from the perspective of an isolated self, a ghost in a machine, cut off from the world. But when we see through this illusion, the world is no longer a collection of alien objects. we realize we are not in the universe. We are the universe experiencing itself. The feeling of meaninglessness arose because we were searching for a fixed, permanent meaning, for a fixed, permanent self. But in a world that is empty of fixed natures, everything is fluid, dynamic, and full of boundless potential. We are no longer trapped by the rigid definitions of our past, our job, or our self-image. We are free to change, to grow, and to create, because we are an open, unfolding process, not a sealed and finished product. Emptiness is not a void. It is the ultimate freedom. The final and most beautiful consequence of seeing the world in this way is the spontaneous arising of a deep and unshakable compassion. When the artificial boundary between self and other becomes transparent, we see that their suffering is our suffering and their happiness is our happiness. The joys and sorrows of the world are no longer happening to them out there. They are happening within the same seamless web of being that we are a part of. To harm another being from this perspective is as illogical as having your left hand intentionally strike your right hand. It is a self-inflicted wound. Compassion ceases to be a moralistic duty or a noble sentiment that we try to cultivate. It becomes the most natural, logical, and warm-hearted response to seeing reality clearly. It is the heart's resonance with the truth of our shared existence. This expansive and compassionate view of reality inevitably transforms our motivation for walking the spiritual path. It ceases to be a purely personal quest for our own peace. We come to understand that our liberation is not separate from the liberation of the farmer who grows our food, the person who made our clothes, or the insects in our garden. We are all jewels in the same magnificent net. This realization that my freedom is inextricably bound up with the freedom of all beings is the very heart of the next stage of our journey. It is the inspiration for the noble and heroic path of the Bodhisattva. The wisdom of interdependence changes everything. Once we see, not just as an idea, but as a felt reality, that we are not separate islands, but waves in a single, vast ocean of being, the entire purpose of our spiritual journey is transformed. The path ceases to be a solitary climb toward our own private peak of peace. A new, more expansive horizon opens up before us, a horizon illuminated by a love so vast it leaves no one behind. This is the entrance to the path of the Bodhisattva. In the early teachings of Buddhism, the highest ideal for a human being was to become an arhat, a worthy one. An arhat is a being who, through immense diligence and personal effort, has followed the Noble Eightfold Path to its conclusion. They have extinguished the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion in their own hearts, severed all attachments, and have attained the ultimate liberation of nirvana, freeing themselves forever from the wearying cycle of suffering and rebirth. This is a monumental and supremely noble achievement, the culmination of a life dedicated to purification and wisdom. Yet, as the Dharma evolved, another, even more compassionate ideal emerged. This was the ideal of the Bodhisattva. A Bodhisattva is a being who has cultivated the path to the very same heights as the Arhat. They stand on the shores of nirvana with final peace just a single step away. But at that very threshold, they pause. They turn their ear back toward the world they are leaving behind, and they hear the endless cries of suffering, the cries of all beings still caught in the cycles of fear, confusion, and pain. And moved by an unbearable compassion, an immense love born from the direct seeing of their interconnectedness with all of life, they make a vow. They turn back from the shores of their own liberation and promise not to enter into their final peace until every last being, down to the last blade of grass, has been safely brought across to the farther shore of enlightenment. This is not a rejection of the Arhat's wisdom, but a magnificent fulfillment of it. It is the understanding that as long as one being suffers, my own liberation is incomplete. The Bodhisattva's journey is no longer motivated by a desire to escape suffering, but by an infinite, heroic love that runs toward it, seeking to transform it. The central question of their life shifts from, how can I find peace, to the far grander question, how can I be of most benefit to all? The gateway to this extraordinary path is the arising of a state of mind known as bodhicitta. which can be translated as the mind of awakening or the heart of enlightenment. Bodhicitta has two facets. The first is aspiring bodhicitta. This is the deep, heartfelt wish, the sincere and powerful intention to attain perfect enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. It is the moment the bodhisattva vow is first truly felt in the heart. This vow is often expressed in beautiful, poetic language, a dedication of one's entire existence to the welfare of others. May I be a bridge for those who need to cross over. May I be a lamp for those in darkness. May I be a healing medicine for all who are sick. May I be a bed for those who are weary and need to rest. For as long as space endures, and for as long as living beings remain, until then may I too abide to dispel the misery of the world. This aspiration becomes the new sun around which the entire solar system of one's life begins to orbit. The second facet is engaging bodhicitta. This is where the aspiration is put into action. It is the active engagement in the specific practices and virtues that will allow one to fulfill that great vow. It is the commitment to actually walking the bodhisattva's path. That path, the training manual for an aspiring bodhisattva, is laid out in a framework known as the 6 perfections, or the paramitas. These are 6 wholesome qualities, which we have already encountered in other forms, now cultivated to a state of perfection, meaning they are practiced without any trace of ego and with the sole motivation of benefiting others. The first is the perfection of generosity, or dana paramita. This is the perfection of giving. While ordinary generosity is a wonderful virtue, the generosity of a bodhisattva is boundless. It includes, of course, the giving of material things, food, clothing, shelter to those in need. But it expands to include the giving of safety and freedom from fear, the act of protecting others from harm, and highest of all is the giving of the Dharma, the gift of the teachings themselves, which show others the path to their own lasting liberation. The bodhisattva gives without any attachment to what is given, without any expectation of thanks or reward, and without any discrimination between who is worthy of their gift and who is not. Their generosity is a spontaneous, joyful outflow of an abundant heart, like a river that flows freely to the sea. The second is the perfection of ethical conduct, or sila paramita. This is the perfection of the ethical principles of right speech, right action, and right livelihood. For a bodhisattva, these are not rules to be followed out of a sense of duty or a fear of negative consequences. Their ethical conduct is a natural and effortless expression of their compassion. They refrain from harming, not because it is forbidden, but because they see all other beings as being as precious as themselves. They cannot bear to cause pain. Their commitment to truthfulness, kindness, and non-exploitation becomes as natural and as necessary as breathing. Their life becomes a living example of harmlessness and integrity. The third is the perfection of patience, or shanti paramita. This is the perfection of forbearance, endurance, and acceptance. It is the immense strength required to bear personal hardships without complaint, to endure criticism and insults without retaliation, and to respond to the anger and ignorance of the world with an unshakable and compassionate heart. This patience is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of profound wisdom. The bodhisattva understands that those who act out of hatred and delusion are themselves deeply suffering. They are caught in the grip of their own afflictions. Seeing this, the bodhisattva's heart does not respond with anger, but with an even deeper compassion, a sincere wish for the angry person to be free from the poison that is consuming them. The fourth is the perfection of joyful effort, or virya paramita. This is the perfection of right effort, now energized by the bodhisattva's boundless vow. This is not a grim, dutiful struggle. It is a joyful, heroic, and tireless diligence. The bodhisattva takes delight in virtuous and beneficial actions. They approach the path with the enthusiasm of a child at play. Their energy is inexhaustible because it is not fueled by personal ambition, but by their infinite compassion for all life. No matter how long the journey seems, no matter how daunting the challenges, they never become discouraged, for they know that every small act of virtue contributes to the great project of universal awakening. The fifth is the perfection of concentration, or dhyana paramita. This is the perfection of meditative absorption. The bodhisattva cultivates the deep states of samadhi, not merely for their own pleasure or peace, but to forge their mind into a perfectly stable, clear, and powerful instrument. From this unshakable foundation of inner calm, they are able to perceive the needs of the world with pristine clarity and to respond with precise and effective wisdom. While the world is tossed on the waves of chaos and drama, the bodhisattva's mind remains a peaceful harbor, a source of stability and refuge for all. The sixth and final perfection, the one that guides and empowers all the others, is the perfection of wisdom, or prajna paramita. This is the perfection of right view, the direct, unshakable, and penetrating insight into the nature of reality. It is the deep experiential realization of interdependence and emptiness, sunyata. This wisdom is the mother of all the other perfections, because it is what makes them truly liberating. It is prajna that allows generosity to be given without any attachment to the idea of a giver, a gift, or a receiver. It is prajna that allows compassion to arise without being entangled in the suffering of pity or despair. It is prajna that allows the bodhisattva to engage fully with the world of form while knowing its empty, dreamlike nature. Wisdom is the eye of the bodhisattva, guiding their every compassionate act. This ideal of the bodhisattva may seem impossibly lofty, a goal for mythological heroes in a distant age. But the path of the bodhisattva is available to us here and now. To walk this path does not require us to be perfect. It requires only the reorientation of our intention. It is the practice of asking, in all the small and large moments of our lives, how can I be of benefit? The parent who patiently cares for a sick child, putting the child's needs before their own, is walking the bodhisattva path. The teacher who works tirelessly to awaken the potential in their students is walking the bodhisattva path. The social activist who fights against injustice, the artist who creates works of beauty that uplift the human spirit, the friend who simply listens with their full, compassionate attention to another in pain. All of these are expressions of the bodhisattva ideal in action. The great bodhisattva of compassion, Avalokiteshvara, is said to have 1,000 arms and 1,000 eyes to better see and respond to the cries of the world. This is a metaphor for our own potential. Each of us, in our own unique way, can be the eyes and hands of compassion in our own corner of the universe. The path of the bodhisattva transforms the spiritual life from a solitary quest for personal peace into a meaningful, heroic, and joyful adventure undertaken for the sake of all. It is the ultimate expression of the wisdom of interdependence, and it offers the most profound and satisfying answer to the modern search for meaning. A life dedicated to the awakening and welfare of all beings is a life of supreme purpose. This grand, universal vision, however, cannot remain an abstract ideal. It must be woven into the very fabric of our ordinary, daily existence. How, then, do we take all of these profound teachings from the foundations of ethics to the depths of meditation, from the insights of wisdom to the vow of the bodhisattva, integrate them into a coherent, sustainable, and joyful way of life? This question leads us to the final part of our exploration, the art of walking the path day by day. We have now traveled a great distance together. We have journeyed from the quiet desperation of a life that feels meaningless to the profound, unifying vision of the bodhisattva. We have diagnosed the universal condition of dukkha, identified its root in the feverish thirst of tanha, and held the luminous hope of nirodha, the truth that a cure is possible. We have walked, step by step, through the Noble Eightfold Path, exploring the foundations of ethical living, the depths of meditative training, and the liberating insights of wisdom. But all of this, every concept, every list, every parable, remains mere theory, a beautiful but useless map until we learn to read it and begin to walk the territory of our own lives. This final stage of our exploration is about just that, the practical art of integration. It is about how we take these profound teachings off the meditation cushion and weave them into the very fabric of our messy, beautiful, and ordinary days. The goal is not to have a spiritual life that is separate from our real life. The goal is for our whole life to become our practice. The bedrock of this integrated life is the establishment of a formal, daily meditation practice. This need not be long or arduous. Even 10 or 15 minutes each day can be transformative. Think of this daily sit not as a chore or a spiritual obligation, but as an essential act of mental and emotional hygiene, as fundamental as brushing your teeth. It is the dedicated time you set aside each day to tune the instrument of your mind and heart. Find a quiet place where you won't be disturbed. Set a timer. Sit in a posture that is both comfortable and Allerton, a cushion on the floor or upright in a chair, and then simply, gently, bring your awareness to the feeling of your breath. When the mind wanders, as it inevitably will, your practice is not to scold yourself, but to notice the wandering with kindness and to gently escort your attention back to the breath. This is the entire practice. The goal is not to have a perfect meditation with no thoughts. The goal is the practice of returning. Each time you come back to the breath, you are strengthening the muscles of mindfulness and concentration. This daily sit is your laboratory. It is where you get to see your habits of mind up close and where you develop the core skills that you will then apply to the other 23 and a half hours of your day. With the foundation of a daily formal practice, we can then begin to weave mindfulness into the moments of our informal life. The Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh taught the beautiful practice of using mindfulness bells. We can choose any recurring sound or event in our day to be our reminder to come back to the present moment. The ringing of the telephone can be a bell. Instead of snatching it up immediately, we can pause, take one conscious breath, and then answer. A red traffic light can be a bell. Instead of feeling impatient, we can use that moment to feel our hands on the steering wheel, to notice our posture, to simply be present. These small, mindful pauses are incredibly powerful. They are tiny breaks in the hypnotic trance of our autopilot existence, moments of waking up. We can also transform our most mundane chores into profound meditations. When you are washing the dishes, you can choose to be fully present with the act of washing dishes. Instead of letting your mind race about the past or the future, you can bring your full attention to the physical sensations. The warmth of the water on your skin, the smooth, slick surface of the plates, the scent of the soap, the sound of the water. In that moment, you are not just washing dishes, you are cultivating presence. The same can be applied to showering, folding laundry, sweeping the floor, or making a cup of tea. These are not interruptions to our spiritual practice. These are our spiritual practice. As we walk this path, it is also essential to remember that we do not have to walk it alone. The Buddha himself emphasized that the Sangha, the community of fellow practitioners, is one of the three most precious jewels of the path, alongside the Buddha, the example of the awakened mind, and the Dharma, the teachings themselves. To try to walk this path in complete isolation is unnecessarily difficult. A supportive community offers inspiration when we feel discouraged. It provides a safe space to ask questions and share our struggles, helping us to see that our difficulties are not unique personal failings, but common challenges on the path. Sharing the journey with trusted friends normalizes the experience and provides invaluable encouragement. In the modern world, a Sangha can take many forms. It could be a local meditation center, an online community, a weekend workshop, or even just one or two close friends with whom you can speak openly and honestly about your inner life. To connect with a Sangha is to find a warm and welcoming harbor in which to rest and refit your ship for the long journey ahead. As we engage more deeply with these teachings, it is important to remember their purpose. The Buddha told a famous story about a man who built a raft to cross a wide and dangerous river. He gathered branches, leaves, and vine stems represent the teachings, the concepts, the techniques. He skillfully bound them together and, using the raft, paddled safely to the other shore, the shore of liberation. The Buddha then asked his monks, "What should this wise man do now? Should he, out of immense gratitude for the raft that saved his life, hoist it onto his shoulders and carry it with him on his journey across the land?" The monks replied, "No, Lord. A wise person would leave the raft on the riverbank and continue his journey unburdened. The teachings are this raft. They are indispensable tools for crossing the river of suffering. We should use them, we should master them, we should be grateful for them, but we must not cling to them as dogma. The goal is not to become a Buddhist. The goal is to become free. The teachings are a finger pointing to the moon. We must not mistake the finger for the moon itself. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, the art of walking this path requires a boundless supply of patience and self-compassion. This is a journey of a lifetime, not a weekend workshop. There will be days of great clarity and open-heartedness. And there will be days when we feel completely lost, when we are utterly hijacked by our old conditioned habits of anger, fear, and craving. This is not a sign of failure. It is simply the nature of the path. The measure of our practice is not whether we ever fall down, but in how we get back up. Do we get up with harsh self-criticism and judgment, adding a second arrow of shame to the pain of having fallen? Or do we get back up with a gentle, forgiving, and compassionate heart, just as we would help a small child who has stumbled? Every moment of waking up, every moment we realize we have been lost in thought, is a moment of success. We must offer ourselves the same boundless metta and karuna that we are striving to cultivate for all other beings. Our own imperfect, stumbling, beautiful journey deserves nothing less. To walk this path is to commit to a life of waking up, moment by moment. It is the integration of our deepest wisdom and our most profound compassion into the very texture of who we are. It is about making our life, our art, a continuous process of learning, growing, and opening. We have now explored the entirety of this vast and beautiful map. We have seen the diagnosis, the cause, the cure, and the prescription. All that remains now is to step back, to take in the whole of the landscape we have traversed, and to see where this great journey has led us. We began this journey together in a quiet room, looking out at a world of glittering promise that somehow felt empty. We began with the silent, aching question of a life overwhelmed by pressure, anxiety, and a subtle sense of meaninglessness. We have traveled far since that initial moment, not to escape that feeling, but to understand it, to befriend it, and ultimately to see through it. We journeyed into the heart of the human condition and had the courage to name our dis-ease, the universal truth of dukkha. We looked deeper and found its source not in the world outside, but in the grasping and clinging of our own minds, the relentless thirst of tanha. And then a light appeared on the horizon, the profound hope of nirvana, the truth that an end to this struggle is not a distant dream, but a tangible possibility. We walked, step by step, along the ancient and timeless map of the Noble Eightfold Path. We learned to build a foundation of integrity and harmlessness in our speech, our actions, and our livelihood, creating a life of outer peace from which we could begin the inner work. We trained the unruly mind through the gentle persistence of effort, the clear seeing of mindfulness, and the unshakable stability of concentration. We cultivated a heart that is truly boundless, learning to love without clinging, to feel compassion without despair, to rejoice in the happiness of others, and to stand in the face of life's storms with a vast and quiet equanimity. And with this purified heart and sharpened mind, we dared to look at reality itself, seeing through the comforting illusions of permanence and the solid self, and awakening to a vision of profound, shimmering interdependence with all of life. The promise of this path was never a life free from difficulty. The first arrows of pain, loss, and disappointment will continue to fly. That is the nature of existence. But the great liberation it offers is the freedom from the second arrow, the self-inflicted wound of our own reactivity. The peace we have been seeking is not a final destination where all problems cease. It is an inner capacity, an unshakable core of awareness that can hold joy and sorrow, success and failure, with the same steady and compassionate embrace. The meaning we have been searching for is not a grand purpose to be discovered somewhere out there. It is something we create, moment by moment, every time we choose to respond to our experience with a little more mindfulness, a little more kindness, a little more wisdom. The emptiness we felt at the beginning is not a void that needs to be filled with more achievements or possessions. It is revealed to be a sacred spaciousness, a freedom from the confines of a rigid and fearful ego, an open field of boundless potential upon which a new story, a story of awakening, can be written. You do not need to retreat from the world to walk this path. You do not need to change who you are in some fundamental way. The tools are now in your hands. The seed of clarity, the capacity for love, the potential for unshakable peace, these are already within you, your deepest birthright. Your work now is simple: to provide the gentle water of your attention and the warm light of your compassionate effort. This great journey does not begin with a momentous decision or a grand gesture. It begins right here in the stillness of this very moment, with the next conscious breath you take.